Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the crisp Montana air filled my lungs as I trudged up the steep trail, my boots crunching on the loose gravel. Glacier National Park stretched out before us, a vast expanse of rugged beauty that both exhilarated and humbled me. I glanced over at Lisa, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, determination etched on her face as she navigated the difficult terrain. "How much further to the summit, Tom?" she called out, a hint of fatigue in her voice. I consulted our map, squinting in the bright afternoon sun. "Should be another mile or so. We're making good time." Lisa nodded, taking a swig from her water bottle. "Good. I can't wait to see that view you've been raving about." We had been planning this hike for months, a chance to escape the chaos of city life and reconnect with nature, and each other. Our relationship had been strained lately, the pressures of work and everyday life slowly driving a wedge between us. This trip was supposed to be our chance to rekindle that spark. As we rounded a bend in the trail, the trees thinned out, revealing a breathtaking vista of snow-capped peaks and pristine valleys. I reached for my camera, eager to capture the moment when a low, rumbling growl froze me in place. "Tom?" Lisa's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with fear. "Please tell me that was your stomach." Slowly, I turned towards the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. There, not 20 feet away, stood a massive grizzly bear. Its brown fur was matted and scarred, evidence of countless battles fought and won. But it was the bear's eyes that truly terrified me, intelligent, almost human-like, and filled with unmistakable anger. "Lisa," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "When I say run, I need you to run. Don't look back, just head straight down the trail, understand?" She nodded, her face pale with fear. The bear let out another growl, this one louder and more menacing. It took a step towards us, its massive paws leaving deep impressions in the soft earth. "Run!" I shouted, giving Lisa a push to get her started. We took off down the trail, our feet pounding against the rocky ground. I could hear the bear's heavy breathing behind us, punctuated by the occasional roar that sent shivers down my spine. Branches whipped at our faces as we crashed through the underbrush, desperation fueling our flight. "Tom!" Lisa cried out, her voice filled with panic. "It's gaining on us." I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The bear was impossibly close, its hot breath practically on my heels. In that moment, I was certain we were going to die. Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath my feet. We had run straight off the trail and into a small clearing, the sudden lack of obstacles causing us to stumble. Lisa and I fell hard, rolling across the forest floor before coming to a stop against a fallen log. Dazed and winded, I scrambled to my feet, pulling Lisa up with me, but it was too late. The bear had entered the clearing, effectively cutting off our escape route. We were trapped. "Lisa," I said, pushing her behind me, "if we don't make it out of this, I want you to know—" "Save it," she interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. "We're not dying here. Not today." The bear approached slowly, almost leisurely, as if savoring our fear. It rose up on its hind legs, towering over us at nearly 10 feet tall. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable attack, but it never came. Instead, a deep, rumbling voice filled the clearing, a voice that seemed to emanate from the bear itself. "Why have you come here?" My eyes snapped open in disbelief. Lisa's grip on my arm tightened, her nails digging into my skin. "Tom," she whispered, "please tell me you heard that too." I nodded, unable to form words. The bear, the talking bear, lowered itself back onto all fours, its intense gaze never leaving us. "I will ask you once more," it said, each word clear and distinct, despite coming from a muzzle never meant for human speech. "Why have you come to this place?" Finding my voice at last, I stammered out a reply. We're just hikers, tourists. We didn't mean any harm." The bear's eyes narrowed, and I felt as if it were looking straight into my soul. Many come to these lands claiming peaceful intentions, yet leave destruction in their wake. How am I to know you are different? Lisa stepped forward, her fear seemingly replaced by a mix of awe and curiosity. We respect this land, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. We've always believed in preserving nature, in leaving no trace. We came here to connect with the wilderness, not to harm it. The bear was silent for a long moment, its massive head tilted slightly as if considering her words. Then, to our amazement, it sat back on its haunches, looking almost relaxed. Your words ring true, it said, but words alone are not enough. If you truly wish to prove your respect for this land and its guardians, you must be tested. Tested? I asked, my mind reeling from the sheer impossibility of the situation. What kind of test? The bear's mouth curved into what I could have sworn was a smile, if bears could smile, that is. A test of your character, your resilience, and your connection to the natural world. Pass, and you will gain knowledge beyond your wildest dreams. Fail, and... It left the consequences unspoken, but the implication was clear. Lisa and I exchanged glances. This was insane. Talking bears, magical tests, it was like something out of a fairy tale. And yet, the bear before us was undeniably real, its presence commanding and undeniable. Do we have a choice? I asked, already knowing the answer. The bear shook its massive head. You entered these lands of your own free will. Now you must face the consequences of that decision. As if on cue, the forest around us seemed to come alive. The trees swayed despite the lack of wind, their leaves whispering secrets in an ancient tongue. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, hinting at creatures and spirits just beyond our perception. Your test begins now, the bear announced, rising to its full height once more. May your actions prove worthy of the trust placed in you. With those words, the clearing was plunged into an unnatural twilight. Lisa grabbed my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. Tom, she said, her voice a mix of fear and excitement, what have we gotten ourselves into? I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. I don't know, I admitted, but whatever happens, we're in this together. As we stood there, surrounded by the awakening forest and faced with challenges beyond our understanding, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives had changed irrevocably. The hike we had planned as a simple getaway had become something far more profound. A journey that would test not just our survival skills, but the very essence of who we were. The bear, our guide, our judge, our potential executioner, watched us with those eerily intelligent eyes. The forest clearing, once bathed in the warm glow of afternoon sunlight, now pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Lisa's grip on my arm tightened, her fingers digging into my skin as we stared at the impossible sight before us. The massive grizzly bear, its fur shimmering with an ethereal light, regarded us with eyes that burned with ancient wisdom. I don't understand, I stammered, my mind reeling. How is this possible? The bear's mouth didn't move, yet its voice resonated in our minds, clear and commanding. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, human. Lisa let out a nervous laugh. Did the bear just quote Shakespeare? Your kind has always sought to categorize and explain the world around you, the bear continued, ignoring Lisa's comment. But there are forces at work in this forest that defy your scientific understanding. Forces that have existed long before your ancestors first walked upright, and will continue long after your cities have crumbled to dust. I swallowed hard, trying to process the bear's words. What do you want from us? The bear's eyes narrowed, glowing with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I held its gaze, sensing that this too was part of the test. I want you to prove your worth, it growled. To show that you are more than just another pair of destructive humans trampling through these sacred lands without a thought for the damage you cause. But we're not like that, Lisa protested, finding her voice. We respect nature, We follow all the park rules. Leave no trace. The bear cut her off with a snort that sent a gust of warm air washing over us. Rules written by humans. For humans. They barely scratch the surface of what it truly means to be in harmony with the natural world. I felt a surge of frustration. Then tell us what you want us to do. We'll prove ourselves to you. The bear's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, if bears could smile. Very well. Your test begins now. As if on cue, the forest around us exploded into life. The trees seemed to grow taller, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, hinting at creatures just beyond our perception. And through it all, a cacophony of whispers filled the air, speaking in languages long forgotten by human ears. Lisa pressed closer to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Tom, what's happening? Before I could answer, the bear spoke again. Listen to the forest. Feel its rhythms, its needs. Only then can you hope to pass the trials ahead. Trials? I asked, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. What kind of trials? But the bear was already fading from view, its form becoming translucent as it backed away into the shadowy undergrowth. 3 tasks you must complete before the sun rises. Fail, and you will join the countless others who have been claimed by these woods. Wait, I called out, but it was too late. The bear had vanished, leaving us alone in the surreal, pulsing forest. Lisa and I stood in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The whispers of the forest grew louder, more insistent, as if urging us to action. Okay, Lisa said, taking a deep breath. Okay, this is happening. We're being tested by a magical talking bear in an enchanted forest. Just another Tuesday, right? Despite the gravity of our situation, I couldn't help but chuckle. Your sarcasm in the face of certain doom is oddly comforting. She managed a weak smile. One of us has to keep it together. So what's the plan? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. Well, the bear said we need to listen to the forest. Maybe if we just, I don't know, open ourselves up to it? Lisa nodded, closing her eyes. Worth a shot. It's not like we have any better ideas. I followed her lead, shutting my eyes and trying to quiet my racing thoughts. At first, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the ragged sound of our breathing. But slowly, as I forced myself to relax, other sounds began to filter through. The rustling of leaves in a non-existent breeze, the scurrying of small creatures through the underbrush, and beneath it all, a low, pulsing rhythm that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Do you feel that? Lisa whispered, her eyes still closed. Yeah, I murmured. It's like a heartbeat. Suddenly, a clear, crystalline voice cut through the whispers. The first trial awaits. Follow the path of starlight. Our eyes snapped open. The clearing had changed once again. A faint silvery trail now wound its way through the trees, glowing with an inner light that reminded me of starshine. I guess that's our cue, I said, gesturing towards the path. Lisa nodded, a determined look settling over her features. Let's do this. We set off down the glowing trail, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of moss that seemed to have sprung up out of nowhere. The forest around us continued to shift and change, trees moving aside to clear our path one moment, then closing in threateningly the next. What do you think the first trial will be? Lisa asked as we walked. I shook my head. No idea, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. She squeezed my hand. Together. After what felt like hours of walking, though it was impossible to tell how much time had actually passed in this strange twilight world, we emerged into another clearing. In the center stood an ancient oak tree, its trunk easily 20 feet in diameter. Carved into the bark was a series of strange symbols, glowing with the same silvery light as our path. I think this is it, I said, approaching the tree cautiously. As we drew closer, the symbols began to shift and change, resolving themselves into words we could understand. To pass this trial, you must give of yourselves, a sacrifice freely made to nourish the heart of the forest. Lisa frowned. Give of ourselves? What does that mean? I studied the words, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. I think it wants our blood. What? Lisa exclaimed. No way. There has to be another interpretation. But even as she spoke, I noticed a sharp protrusion emerging from the tree's bark, a natural knife, honed to a wicked point. I don't think we have a choice, I said grimly. The bear warned us that failing these trials would be fatal. If a little blood is all it takes to pass this one, we should consider ourselves lucky. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue further, but instead she set her jaw and nodded. You're right. So, who goes first? I stepped forward. I will. Taking a deep breath, I pressed my palm against the sharp protrusion. I winced as it pierced my skin, a trickle of blood running down my hand and onto the roots of the great oak. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a groaning sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth, the tree began to change. Its bark softened, taking on a warm golden hue. Leaves sprouted from bare branches, unfurling in a matter of seconds. And most incredibly, flowers began to bloom. Not just on the oak, but on every tree and bush in sight. Oh my God, Lisa breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. I stared at my hand in amazement. The cut had already healed, leaving not even a scar behind. Your turn, I said softly. Lisa nodded, stepping up to the tree. She repeated my actions, pressing her palm to the protrusion. As her blood touched the roots, the transformation continued. The flowers grew larger, their petals shimmering with iridescent colors. Fruits appeared on the branches, ripening before our eyes. The very air seemed to grow thicker, filled with the scent of life and growth. As the changes slowed, then stopped, we stood in awe of the vibrant, lush forest that had replaced the eerie twilight world of just moments ago. We did it, Lisa said, a note of pride in her voice. We passed the first trial. I nodded, still somewhat dazed by the experience. Yeah, but remember, the bear said there were 3 tasks. This is just the beginning. As if in response to my words, the whispers of the forest rose once again, guiding us towards our next challenge. We shared a look of determination, then set off down a new path, one that glowed with the warm golden light of the transformed forest. The first trial had tested our willingness to sacrifice. What the next 2 would demand of us, I couldn't begin to guess. But as we walked hand in hand through this magical, terrifying wilderness, I knew that together, we stood a chance of making it through the night. The golden glow of the transformed forest faded as we ventured deeper into the wilderness, guided by the unseen presence of the bear. The air grew thick with an otherworldly mist, curling around our ankles and obscuring the path ahead. Lisa's hand tightened in mine as we pressed forward, the weight of our next trial hanging heavy in the air. Tom, Lisa whispered, her voice tight with tension. Do you get the feeling we're being watched? I nodded, my eyes darting from tree to tree. The forest had taken on a distinctly sentient quality, the branches swaying without wind, leaves rustling in patterns that seemed almost like speech. Yeah, it's like the whole forest is alive. As if in response to my words, the mist suddenly thickened, swirling around us with increasing speed. I felt Lisa's hand slip from mine as the fog engulfed us completely. Lisa, I cried out, reaching blindly into the whiteness. Lisa, where are you? Her voice came back faint and distant. Tom, I can't see you. What's happening? Before I could respond, the mist cleared as quickly as it had appeared. But Lisa was gone, leaving me alone in a forest that seemed to have transformed once again. The trees loomed larger, their bark darker and more gnarled. The very air felt charged with an electric tension that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Lisa, I called out again, my voice echoing unnaturally in the dense woods. No response came. The bear's voice rumbled through my mind, startling me. Your second trial begins now. Face the challenges of the forest alone and prove your worth. Wait, I shouted, spinning around, trying to locate the source of the voice. What have you done with Lisa? Where is she? She faces her own trials, the bear's voice replied, fading away. As must you. As the last echoes of the bear's words dissipated, the forest around me sprang into motion. Roots erupted from the ground, writhing like serpents. Branches reached down, grasping at my clothes and hair. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding a tangle of vines that shot out from a nearby tree. Okay, Tom, I muttered to myself, trying to calm my racing heart. You can do this. Just listen to the forest, right? I closed my eyes, trying to center myself as I had during the first trial. The chaotic sounds of the animated forest faded, replaced by a deep, thrumming pulse, the heartbeat of the woods I had sensed earlier. Instinctively, I synchronized my breathing with this rhythm, and as I did, I felt a change come over me. When I opened my eyes, the world looked different. I could see energy flowing through the trees like sap, could sense the intentions behind the forest's movements. Without conscious thought, I stepped to the side, avoiding a root that would have tripped me. I ducked under a swinging branch, then vaulted over a sudden growth of thorny bushes. Moving with a grace and agility I'd never possessed before, I navigated through the forest's obstacles. Each challenge seemed to flow into the next, leaping across suddenly appearing chasms, climbing trees that grew to impossible heights in seconds, swimming through rivers that materialized out of nowhere. As I faced each new trial, I felt myself changing, adapting. My senses sharpened, my reflexes quickened, and I began to understand the forest in ways I never thought possible. I could communicate with the plants and animals, not through words, but through a deep, instinctual connection. Hours seemed to pass, though time had little meaning in this enchanted realm. Just when I thought I couldn't face another challenge, the forest stilled. I found myself in a small clearing, panting and exhausted, but filled with a sense of accomplishment and wonder. The bear's voice returned, tinged with what sounded like approval. You have listened well and learned much, but your trial is not yet complete. Now, you must find your companion and guide her to safety. As the voice faded, I felt a tug in my mind, a sense of direction pulling me towards Lisa. Without hesitation, I set off, moving through the forest with newfound ease. Trees bent out of my way, roots smoothed my path, and birds called out directions I somehow understood. Finally, I burst into another clearing and saw Lisa. She was surrounded by a whirlwind of leaves and petals, her eyes closed in concentration, her hands moving in intricate patterns as she seemed to direct the flow of nature around her. "Lisa," I called out. Her eyes snapped open, the whirlwind dissipating as her concentration broke. "Tom," she cried, running towards me. We embraced, the relief of reunion washing over us. As we pulled apart, I noticed changes in Lisa that mirrored my own. Her eyes held a new depth of understanding, and there was an aura of natural energy around her that I could now perceive. "You look different," she said, studying my face. I laughed softly. "So do you. I guess we've both been through quite an ordeal." Lisa nodded, her expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Tom, the things I've seen, what I've learned, it's incredible. I can feel the life force of every plant and creature around us. I communicated with a centuries-old tree, learned secrets of growth and healing that modern science hasn't even dreamed of." "I know what you mean," I replied, sharing my own experiences. As we talked, I realized that while our trials had been different, they had changed us in similar ways, attuning us to the natural world in profound and unexpected ways. Our conversation was interrupted by the now familiar rumble of the bear's voice. "You have both proven yourselves individually. Now for your final trial, you must work together to find your way out of the heart of the forest. Use your new abilities wisely, for the path is treacherous and ever-changing." As the voice faded, the clearing around us began to shift and warp. Trees uprooted themselves and moved, creating a constantly changing maze. The ground beneath our feet alternated between solid earth, treacherous bogs, and narrow stone bridges over seemingly bottomless chasms. Lisa and I shared a determined look. "Together?" she asked, holding out her hand. I took it, feeling the pulse of the forest's energy flowing between us. Together. We set off into the shifting landscape, our newfound abilities working in perfect harmony. Where I could sense the safest path through the moving trees, Lisa could communicate with the plants to hold still momentarily. When faced with a raging river, I could read the currents to find the best crossing point, while Lisa could calm the waters to ease our passage. As we progressed, the challenges grew more intense. We faced illusions that tried to lead us astray, creatures of living shadow that sought to separate us, and temptations of power that promised an easy way out if we'd only abandon our partner. Through it all, we held fast to each other and to the lessons we'd learned. We listened to the forest, respected its power, and worked with nature rather than trying to dominate it. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, we emerged from the dense woods into a meadow bathed in the first light of dawn. The bear stood waiting for us, its form more solid and real than we'd yet seen it. "You have passed all 3 trials," it said, its voice filled with a warmth we hadn't heard before. "You have proven yourselves worthy of the forest's secrets and its protection." Lisa and I stood hand in hand, exhausted but exhilarated. "What happens now?" I asked. The bear's eyes twinkled with an almost human expression of amusement. "Now, young guardians, your real journey begins. The forest has chosen you, has changed you. You will never see the world the same way again." As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across the meadow, Lisa and I looked at each other, seeing the truth of the bear's words reflected in each other's eyes. We had entered these woods as simple hikers, seeking a brief escape from our everyday lives. We would leave as something far different, connected to nature in ways we were only beginning to understand, and bound to a duty we had never anticipated. The forest whispered around us, no longer threatening but welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, bathing the forest in a golden glow, Lisa and I stood before the bear, our minds still reeling from the night's trials. The massive grizzly regarded us with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the cusp of yet another revelation. "You have proven yourselves worthy," the bear rumbled, its voice carrying the weight of ages. "Now, it is time for you to understand the true nature of this forest and the role you are to play." Before our astonished eyes, the bear's form began to shimmer and shift. Its fur seemed to dissolve into motes of light, swirling and coalescing into a new shape. Where once stood a grizzly, there now towered a being of pure, radiant energy. It was vaguely humanoid in form, but its edges were indistinct, constantly shifting like the aurora borealis. At its core, I could see what looked like a miniature galaxy, stars and nebulae swirling in cosmic dance. Lisa's hand tightened in mine, her voice a whisper of awe. "Tom, are you seeing this?" I nodded, unable to form words. The being before us radiated an aura of ancient power that made my newfound connection to nature feel like a drop in the ocean. When it spoke again, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, reverberating through the very fabric of reality. "I am Eldrath, guardian of this forest, since before your kind first walked upright. I have watched civilizations rise and fall, seen the earth reshaped by time and cataclysm, and through it all, I have protected this sacred land." Eldrath gestured, and the forest around us seemed to fade away, replaced by visions of the past. We saw primordial jungles teeming with creatures long extinct, witnessed the gradual formation of the mountains and valleys we now knew as Glacier National Park. "This forest is more than just a collection of trees and animals," Eldrath continued. "It is a nexus of natural energy, a place where the veil between your world and the realm of spirits grows thin. It is my duty to maintain the balance, to ensure that the power of this place is not misused or corrupted." The visions shifted, showing us glimpses of Eldrath's past encounters with humans. Some came seeking wisdom and left transformed like us. Others came with darker intentions, seeking to exploit the forest's power for their own gain. For millennia, I have stood as the sole guardian of this place, Eldrath said, a note of weariness creeping into its voice. But now a darkness approaches that threatens to overwhelm even my power. The idyllic scenes around us darkened, replaced by unsettling images of withered plants, polluted streams, and animals fleeing in terror. I felt a chill run down my spine as I sensed the malevolence behind these visions. "What is it?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with concern. "What's causing this?" Eldrath's form seemed to dim slightly, as if the very thought of this threat drained its energy. "It is a corruption born of human greed and disregard for the natural world. It feeds on pollution, on the destruction of habitats, on the suffering of creatures great and small. And it has set its sights on this forest, drawn by the power concentrated here." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "That's why you tested us," I said. "You're looking for help." Eldrath nodded, its starry core pulsing in confirmation. "For the first time in countless ages, I find myself in need of allies. The trials you faced were not merely tests, but a means of awakening your latent connection to the natural world. You have been chosen, Tom and Lisa, to stand alongside me as guardians of this forest." Lisa and I exchanged glances, the weight of this responsibility settling over us. It was one thing to experience a night of magical trials, to discover a hidden world within our familiar reality. It was quite another to be told we had a destiny to fulfill, a sacred duty to protect this land from an encroaching darkness. "But we're just ordinary people," Lisa protested, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "How can we possibly help against something so powerful?" Eldrath's form brightened, and I felt a wave of reassurance wash over us. "You are far from ordinary, even if you do not yet realize it. The abilities you discovered during your trials are just the beginning. With time and training, you will grow into your roles as guardians." As if to demonstrate, Eldrath reached out with tendrils of energy, touching our foreheads gently. In that instant, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd experienced before. My awareness expanded, and I could suddenly sense every tree, every blade of grass, every creature for miles around. I could feel the flow of water underground, the slow growth of moss on rocks, the dance of insects in the air. Beside me, Lisa gasped, and I knew she was experiencing the same overwhelming sensations. When the moment passed, leaving us breathless and dizzy, I looked at her with new eyes. She seemed to glow with an inner light, and I could see threads of energy connecting her to the forest around us. "This is but a fraction of what you will be capable of," Eldrath said. "But power alone is not enough. To truly protect this forest, you must understand it, love it, and be willing to sacrifice for it. The path ahead will not be easy." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees, I felt the enormity of the choice before us. We had come to this forest seeking a simple hiking adventure, a brief escape from our everyday lives. Now we were being asked to become something more, to take on a responsibility that would irrevocably change the course of our lives. I looked at Lisa, searching her face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Instead, I saw determination and a spark of excitement in her eyes that mirrored my own feelings. "What do you think?" I asked softly. "Can we really do this?" Lisa squeezed my hand, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I think we'd be crazy to say no. We've been given a chance to make a real difference, to protect something truly important. Besides," she added with a hint of her usual humor, "how many people can say they've been personally recruited by an ancient forest spirit?" I couldn't help but laugh, feeling some of the tension ease from my shoulders. "When you put it that way, how can we refuse?" We turned back to Eldrath, who had been waiting patiently for our decision. The being's form seemed to brighten in anticipation. "We'll do it," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "We'll help you protect the forest." Lisa nodded in agreement. "Whatever it takes, we're in." Eldrath's form pulsed with what I could only interpret as joy and relief. You have made a wise choice, young guardians. Know that in accepting this role, you bind yourselves not just to me, but to the forest itself. Its fate will be your fate, its triumphs and struggles your own. As Eldrath spoke, I felt something shift within me, as if the last pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. The connection to the forest that had been awakened during our trials now felt permanent, an integral part of who I was. What happens now? Lisa asked, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Eldrath's form began to fade, merging back into the forest around us. Now, your true journey begins. Return to your world, but know that you carry a piece of this forest with you always. When the time comes, you will be called upon to fulfill your duty as guardians. As Eldrath disappeared entirely, leaving us alone in the clearing, the first rays of true daylight broke through the trees. The forest looked different now, more vibrant, more alive. Or perhaps it was our perception that had changed. Lisa and I stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. Finally, I turned to her with a wry smile. "So," I said, "I guess this means our vacation plans have changed a bit." Lisa laughed, the sound ringing through the trees like music. "Just a bit, but you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way." Hand in hand, we began the long trek back to civilization, knowing that while we might look the same on the outside, we were profoundly changed within. The weeks following our encounter with Eldrath passed in a blur of normalcy that felt increasingly out of step with our new reality. Lisa and I returned to our jobs and daily routines, but the connection to the forest remained, a constant presence in the back of our minds. We spent our evenings and weekends honing our newfound abilities, marveling at the way we could now communicate with plants and animals, sense the flow of natural energy, and even manipulate it to a small degree. But as autumn crept in, painting the forest in hues of red and gold, we felt a growing unease. The whispers of the trees carried warnings of encroaching darkness, and we knew it was time to return to Glacier National Park. As we hiked along familiar trails, the changes were subtle at first. A patch of withered grass here, a sickly-looking tree there. But the deeper we ventured into the forest, the more pronounced the signs of decay became. Lisa paused, kneeling to examine a cluster of mushrooms that seemed to pulse with a sickly, unnatural light. "Tom, look at this. I've never seen anything like it." I crouched beside her, extending my senses as Eldrath had taught us. What I felt made me recoil. It's wrong, like it's sucking the life out of everything around it instead of participating in the natural cycle. We continued on, our unease growing with each step. The vibrant autumn colors we'd expected were muted, leaves turning brown and falling prematurely. The usual chatter of wildlife was eerily absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. As we rounded a bend in the trail, we encountered a group of hikers coming the other way. At first glance, they seemed normal, a family of 4, equipped for a day hike. But as they drew closer, I felt Lisa tense beside me. "Tom," she whispered, "something's not right with them." I saw it too. Their movements were stiff, almost mechanical, and their eyes were vacant, devoid of any spark of life or consciousness. "Hello there," I called out, trying to keep my voice casual. "Nice day for a hike, isn't it?" The family stopped, turning to face us in perfect unison. When the father spoke, his voice was flat and emotionless. "Yes, a nice day. You should turn back. Nothing to see further along the trail." A chill ran down my spine. I reached out with my newfound senses, probing gently, and what I felt made my stomach churn. These people were empty shells, their life force drained and replaced by the same corrupt energy we'd sensed in the decaying forest. Lisa squeezed my hand in warning. "Thank you for the advice," she said brightly. "We'll keep that in mind. Enjoy your hike." As soon as the family was out of sight, we broke into a run, putting as much distance between us and them as possible. What do we do? Lisa panted as we ran. We can't just leave them like that. I shook my head, my mind racing. I don't know. But whatever's causing this, it's getting stronger. We need to find the source. We pressed on, following the trail of corruption that was now glaringly obvious to our enhanced senses. The forest around us grew more twisted and sickly with each passing mile. Trees that should have stood tall for centuries were bent and gnarled, their bark oozing a foul-smelling sap. The ground squelched under our feet, the soil turned to a noxious muck. Suddenly, a blood-curdling howl split the air. We froze, instinctively dropping into defensive stances as Eldrath had taught us. From the underbrush emerged a pack of wolves, but like the hikers, these animals were clearly not themselves. Their fur was matted and falling out in clumps, their eyes glowing with the same sickly light we'd seen in the mushrooms. "Lisa," I said, my voice low and steady. "Remember what Eldrath taught us. We can do this." She nodded, her face set with determination. As the wolves charged, we reached out with our powers, tapping into the remaining healthy energy of the forest around us. I felt the strength of the ancient trees flow through me, while Lisa channeled the quick, darting energy of a mountain stream. The battle was fierce and terrifying. The wolves attacked with unnatural strength and coordination, their jaws snapping inches from our flesh. But we moved with a grace and power we'd never possessed before, deflecting attacks and striking back with concentrated bursts of natural energy. One by one, the wolves fell, not dead but unconscious. As the last one dropped, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Lisa stumbled and I caught her, both of us breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" I asked, checking her for injuries. She nodded, a weak smile on her face. "I'm fine. That was intense. I've never felt power like that before." I knew exactly what she meant. The rush of energy, the perfect synchronization with the forest and with each other. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. As our breathing steadied, we became aware of a low, pulsing hum emanating from somewhere nearby. Following the sound, we pushed through a thick tangle of corrupted vegetation and found ourselves at the mouth of a cave. The entrance was partially hidden by overgrown vines, but there was no mistaking the malevolent energy pouring out of it. The air around the cave shimmered with heat haze, despite the cool autumn temperature. "This has to be it," Lisa said, her voice hushed. "The source of the corruption." I nodded, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. Eldrath warned us about this, a darkness born of human greed and disregard for nature. Whatever's in there, it's powerful. Lisa squared her shoulders, a look of fierce determination on her face. "Then we have to stop it. We're the Guardians now, remember? This is what we signed up for." She was right, of course. But as we stood there, preparing to enter the cave and face whatever horror awaited us, I couldn't shake a terrible feeling of foreboding. The corruption we'd seen so far was bad enough, but I sensed that it was just the tip of the iceberg. Whatever lurked in the depths of that cave was on a whole other level. "Lisa," I said, taking her hand, "before we go in there, I need you to promise me something." She looked at me, her eyes questioning. If things go wrong, if it looks like we can't both make it out, I want you to run. Get back to Eldrath, warn him about what's happening here." "Tom, no," she protested. "We go in together, we come out together, I'm not leaving you behind." I shook my head, my voice firm. "One of us has to survive this, to carry on the fight if necessary. Promise me, Lisa." She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, I promise. But the same goes for you, understand? If it comes down to it, you get out and leave me behind." The thought of abandoning Lisa made my heart clench, but I knew she was right. We had a responsibility now that was bigger than either of us. "I promise," I said softly. We stood there for a moment longer, hands clasped, drawing strength from each other and from the forest around us. Then, with a shared nod of determination, we stepped into the cave mouth. The corrupted energy hit us like a physical force, nearly driving us to our knees. The walls pulsed with that sickly light we'd seen before, and the air was thick with a miasma that made breathing difficult. But we pressed on, deeper into the earth, towards the source of the darkness that threatened to consume everything we'd sworn to protect. As we ventured further into the cave, the oppressive atmosphere grew stronger. The rock walls seemed to close in around us, and more than once I could have sworn I heard whispering voices just at the edge of hearing, tempting us to turn back, to give in to despair. But we held firm, our resolve strengthened by our connection to each other and to the forest we'd sworn to protect. Whatever awaited us in the depths of this cave, we would face it together, as guardians of the land and champions of nature itself. The deeper we ventured into the cave, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickly, otherworldly light, casting writhing shadows that played tricks on our eyes. The air grew thick and heavy, each breath a struggle against the miasma of corruption that permeated everything. Lisa's hand tightened in mine as we navigated a particularly narrow passage. "Tom," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. "Do you hear that?" I strained my ears, trying to filter out the constant low hum of malevolent energy that surrounded us. Then I heard it, a faint, discordant melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wormed its way into my mind, bringing with it flashes of nightmarish visions. "Try to block it out," I said, gritting my teeth against the assault on our senses. "Remember what Eldrath taught us about mental shielding." We pressed on, using our newfound abilities to create a barrier of natural energy around our minds. It helped, but the strain of maintaining the shield while navigating the treacherous terrain was exhausting. The passage opened into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Strange, phosphorescent fungi clung to the walls, their glow revealing glimpses of ancient cave paintings that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of the eye. "Look," Lisa said, pointing to a series of tunnels branching off from the main cavern. "Which way do you think we should go?" I was about to respond when a low rumble shook the ground beneath our feet. Dust and small rocks began to rain down from above. "Cave in!" I shouted, pulling Lisa towards the nearest tunnel entrance. "Run!" We sprinted forward as the rumbling grew louder. Just as we reached the tunnel, a massive section of the cavern ceiling collapsed. I felt Lisa's hand torn from mine as we were violently separated by a wall of falling rock. "Lisa," I screamed, coughing in the thick cloud of dust. "Lisa, can you hear me?" For a heart-stopping moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, I heard her voice. "Tom, I'm okay, but I'm trapped on the other side. The tunnel's completely blocked." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a wave of panic. We were separated in this maze of corruption, with no way to reach each other. "Hold on," I called back, my mind racing. "I'll find another way around. Just stay where you are." "Be careful." Lisa's voice was fainter now, as if she were moving away. "Something's not right here. I feel pulled, like something's calling me." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "Lisa, listen to me. Whatever you do, don't follow that feeling. It's the corruption trying to lure you in. Stay put and keep your mental shields up." There was no response. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound could have been. Fighting down my rising panic, I took a deep breath and tried to center myself. I reached out with my senses, seeking any trace of Lisa's energy signature or a path through the collapsed tunnel, but the oppressive aura of corruption made it nearly impossible to detect anything beyond my immediate surroundings. With no other choice, I pressed on into the tunnel, hoping to find another way to reach Lisa. The passage twisted and turned, branching off into smaller side tunnels that looked more like veins in some vast, diseased organism than natural formations. As I walked, I became aware of a faint whisper at the edge of my hearing. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the cave, like the maddening melody we'd heard earlier. But as I focused on it, I realized it was familiar. The voice of the forest, barely audible through the layers of corruption. "Guide me," I whispered, opening myself to the faint thread of natural energy. Help me find Lisa." The whisper grew slightly stronger, urging me down one passage and then another. I lost all sense of time and direction, trusting entirely in this tenuous connection to the world above. After what felt like hours of wandering, the tunnel suddenly opened into a vast underground chamber. I stumbled to a halt, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Before me stretched an entire city, its architecture unlike anything I'd ever seen. Buildings of impossible geometry rose into the darkness, their surfaces covered in pulsing, vein-like patterns of corrupt energy. Streets and bridges crisscrossed at mind-bending angles, defying the laws of physics. And there were people, or what had once been people. Ghostly, twisted figures moved through the streets, their forms flickering and distorting like bad television reception. Some appeared almost normal from a distance, only to reveal horrifically warped features up close. Others were barely recognizable as humanoid, their bodies mutated into nightmarish new forms. "What is this place?" I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. As if in response, a chorus of whispers filled my mind, fragments of ancient memories and forgotten lore. This city had once been a thriving center of mystical knowledge, its inhabitants seekers of arcane wisdom. But they had delved too deep, tapping into forces they couldn't control. The corruption had taken root here long ago, twisting the city and its people into this nightmare realm. I wanted to turn back, to flee from this abomination. But the faint whisper of the forest urged me forward. Lisa was here, somewhere in this corrupted metropolis. Steeling myself, I began to make my way through the city streets. I moved as quietly as possible, using every ounce of my newfound abilities to avoid detection. The twisted inhabitants seemed largely oblivious to my presence, lost in their own maddened existence. As I neared the center of the city, I felt a surge of familiar energy. Lisa was close. I quickened my pace, hope and dread warring in my chest. Finally, I emerged into a vast central plaza dominated by a towering structure that pulsed with dark power. And there, at the base of the structure, stood Lisa. Relief flooded through me. "Lisa!" I called out, rushing towards her. She turned and my steps faltered. Something was wrong. Her posture was too stiff, her movements unnaturally smooth. And her eyes glowed with the same sickly light that permeated this corrupted realm. "Tom," she said, her voice a discordant blend of Lisa's familiar tones and something alien. "I'm so glad you're here. Isn't it wonderful? Can't you feel the power?" I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. "Lisa, this isn't you. Whatever's happened, whatever's controlling you, we can fight it. Remember who you are, what we came here to do." A fleeting expression of confusion crossed her face, quickly replaced by a beatific smile that was somehow more terrifying than any snarl. "But I remember perfectly, Tom. We came to save the forest, and now I understand this is how we do it. We embrace the power, use it to reshape the world into something better." She held out her hand, corrupt energy crackling around her fingers. "Join me, Tom. Together we can remake everything. No more destruction, no more greed. We'll wipe the slate clean and start anew." I shook my head, taking a step back. "That's the corruption talking, Lisa. This isn't the way. Think about Eldrath, about the forest. This power isn't natural, it's consuming everything, twisting it into this." I gestured at the nightmarish city around us. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But then her expression hardened. "If you won't join me willingly, then I'll have to convince you." She raised her hands and I felt the corrupt energy gathering around her. The whisper of the forest in my mind rose to a desperate crescendo, urging me to act. Time seemed to slow as I faced the terrifying reality of my situation. Lisa, my partner, my love, my fellow guardian, was lost to the very corruption we'd sworn to fight. And now I had to make an impossible choice. Find a way to save her, or stop her from unleashing this nightmare upon the world above. As Lisa's corrupted power surged towards me, I drew on every ounce of natural energy I could muster. The battle for Lisa's soul, and the fate of the forest we'd sworn to protect, was about to begin. The air crackled with tension as we stood facing each other in the heart of the corrupted underground city. Lisa's eyes, once full of warmth and determination, now blazed with an otherworldly light. I raised my hands, channeling the pure energy of the forest to create a shield around myself. "Lisa, please," I pleaded, my voice cracking with emotion. "This isn't you. Fight it." Her response was a wave of corrupted power that slammed into my shield, sending me staggering backward. The sheer force of it was staggering, far beyond anything we'd been capable of before. "Don't you see, Tom?" she said, her voice a haunting mixture of Lisa's and something ancient and malevolent. "This is evolution. We can reshape the world, purge it of the humans who are destroying it." I gritted my teeth, reinforcing my shield as she unleashed another assault. "By becoming the very thing we swore to fight? Look around you, Lisa. This isn't salvation, it's annihilation." For a brief moment I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. But then the corruption surged, and her expression hardened once more. The battle raged on, corrupt energy clashing against the pure power of nature. With each exchange, I felt my strength waning. Lisa, or the thing controlling her, seemed to grow stronger, feeding off the dark energy that permeated this underground realm. As I desperately fought to hold my ground, I knew that this was more than just a physical battle. I had to find a way to reach the real Lisa, to break through the corruption that had ensnared her mind and soul. But how? The cavern trembled with the force of our clash, corrupt energy battling against the pure power of nature. Lisa, or rather the entity wearing her face, advanced relentlessly, each step leaving a trail of withering corruption in her wake. "Why do you resist, Tom?" she asked, her voice a dissonant blend of Lisa's familiar tones and something ancient and malevolent. "Can't you see the potential? With this power, we could reshape the world, purge it of the rot that humans have spread." I gritted my teeth, channeling every ounce of natural energy I could muster into a protective barrier. "That's not reshaping, Lisa, it's destruction. Look around you. This isn't salvation, it's annihilation." Her laughter echoed through the cavern, a sound that chilled me to my core. "Annihilation? No, my love. This is transcendence." With a gesture, Lisa summoned a wave of corrupted energy that crashed against my shield. I staggered back, feeling the barrier crack under the assault. The sheer power at her command was staggering, far beyond anything we'd been capable of before. As we battled, I desperately searched for any sign of the real Lisa beneath the corruption. A flicker in her eyes, a hesitation in her movements, anything that might give me hope of reaching her. But with each passing moment, that hope dwindled. "Lisa, please," I pleaded, my voice cracking with emotion. "This isn't you. Remember who you are, what we swore to protect. Remember Eldrath, the forest, our duty as guardians." For a brief instant, I saw something flicker across her face, a moment of confusion, perhaps even recognition. But then the otherworldly glow in her eyes intensified, and her expression hardened once more. "Eldrath," she spat, the name twisted with contempt. "A relic, clinging to old ways. This power is the future, Tom. Join me and we can usher in a new age." She raised her hands, corrupt energy crackling between her fingers. I braced myself for another assault, knowing my strength was fading fast. How long could I hold out? And even if I could, what then? The thought of harming Lisa, even to save her, was almost unbearable. Just as Lisa was about to unleash another wave of power, a familiar roar shook the cavern. A blinding light erupted between us, coalescing into the shimmering, ethereal form of Eldrath. "Eldrath!" I gasped, relief and hope surging through me. The ancient guardian's form pulsed with power, pushing back the encroaching corruption. When it spoke, its voice resonated with the wisdom of ages. "Young guardians, my heart aches to see you like this." Lisa snarled, her corrupted form recoiling from Eldrath's radiance. Stay out of this, old one. Your time is past. Eldrath's gaze fell upon Lisa, filled with infinite sadness. Oh, child, what have they done to you? Turning to me, Eldrath's voice took on an urgent tone. Tom, listen carefully. The corruption has taken deep root in Lisa, but all is not lost. There is a way to save her, to purge the darkness from her soul. Hope flared in my chest. Tell me, I'll do anything to bring her back. Anything? Eldrath's form seemed to dim slightly. Be certain, young guardian. The price is steep. To save Lisa, you must be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. The implications of Eldrath's words hit me like a physical blow. You mean... Eldrath nodded solemnly. Your life force, freely given, can drive out the corruption and restore Lisa. But the cost? It may well be your own existence. Time seemed to stand still as the weight of the choice before me settled on my shoulders. To save Lisa, to fulfill my duty as a guardian and protect the forest from this corruption, but at the cost of my own life. Lisa's corrupted form laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally through the cavern. How touching, but futile. This power is beyond anything you can imagine, old one. We are the future. She unleashed a torrent of corrupt energy at Eldrath. The ancient guardian deflected the assault, but I could see the effort it cost. Even Eldrath's power had limits against this darkness. I closed my eyes, centering myself in the midst of chaos. I thought of Lisa, her smile, her determination, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about protecting nature. I thought of the forest, of the life and beauty we had sworn to safeguard, and I knew, with a clarity that cut through doubt and fear, what I had to do. Opening my eyes, I met Eldrath's gaze and nodded. Tell me what to do. Eldrath's form brightened, radiating approval and sorrow in equal measure. Open yourself fully to the forest, young guardian. Let its energy flow through you without reservation. Direct that power into Lisa, not to fight the corruption, but to nurture the spark of her true self that still remains. It will be painful and the outcome is uncertain, but it is her only chance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Then I dropped all barriers, all restraint, opening myself completely to the energy of the forest. It flooded into me, a torrent of life and power beyond anything I had ever experienced. Every cell in my body sang with it, every breath a symphony of nature's glory. Turning to Lisa, I saw her corrupted form falter, sensing the change. "What are you doing?" she hissed, uncertainty creeping into her voice for the first time. "Saving you," I said simply. Then I released the flood of natural energy, directing it not as a weapon, but as an offering of pure, unconditional love. The pain was immediate and all-consuming. It felt as if every atom of my being was being torn apart and reassembled. Through the haze of agony, I saw the energy engulf Lisa, surrounding her in a cocoon of radiant, living light. She screamed, a sound of rage and fear, and underneath it all, a glimmer of Lisa's true voice. The corruption fought back viciously, tendrils of darkness lashing out against the onslaught of natural energy. I poured everything I had into the connection, every memory, every hope, every ounce of love I felt for Lisa, and for the forest we had sworn to protect. My vision began to darken at the edges as I felt my life force draining away. Just as I thought I could give no more, that I would be consumed entirely, I heard Lisa's voice, her real voice, cry out, "Tom! Oh God, Tom, what's happening?" With one final, monumental effort, I pushed the last reserves of my strength into the connection. The world exploded into blinding light, and I knew no more. An eternity seemed to pass before awareness slowly returned. I felt cool earth beneath me, heard the faint whisper of leaves in a breeze. Gradually, I became aware of a weight on my chest, of fingers gently stroking my face. With immense effort, I opened my eyes. Lisa's face swam into focus above me, her eyes, blessedly free of that terrible glow, filled with tears. "Tom," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Oh, thank God. I thought..." I thought I'd lost you. I tried to speak, but could only manage a weak cough. Lisa helped me sit up slowly, and I saw that we were back in the forest, the entrance to the cave barely visible some distance away. Eldrath stood nearby, its ethereal form pulsing gently. What happened? I finally managed to croak out. Lisa's arms tightened around me. You saved me, Tom. You brought me back from that darkness. I remember all of it, like a terrible nightmare. If you hadn't... Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought. I held her close, marveling at the simple fact of her presence, of her return to herself. Eldrath's voice resonated gently in our minds. You have both shown tremendous courage and sacrifice. The corruption has been driven back, though not defeated entirely. It will take time for the forest to heal, but heal it will, thanks to your actions. I looked up at our guardian and mentor. But how did we survive? I thought that the price would be your life. Eldrath's form seemed to shimmer with something almost like amusement. The universe is not always so cruel, young guardian. Your willingness to sacrifice everything was enough. It allowed you to channel more power than I thought possible, burning away the corruption without consuming yourself in the process. Lisa helped me to my feet. I felt weak, drained in a way that went beyond mere physical exhaustion, but I was alive, and Lisa was herself again. We had survived. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, I looked out over the forest. The signs of corruption were still visible, withered patches of vegetation, areas where the very air seemed darker. But already, I could sense the forest beginning to heal, life and vitality slowly returning. Lisa's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. What now? She asked softly. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. Now, we heal. We help the forest recover. And we prepare, because something tells me this fight isn't over. Eldrath nodded solemnly. Wise words, young guardian. The darkness has been driven back, but not destroyed. It will return in time, perhaps in new forms. But you have proven yourselves true guardians of the forest. Whatever comes, I have faith that you will face it together. As we stood there, watching the new day dawn over the forest we had sworn to protect, I felt a profound sense of both accomplishment and trepidation. We had faced our first great trial as guardians and emerged victorious, but at great cost. The road ahead would not be easy, but as I looked at Lisa, saw the determination and love shining in her eyes, I knew that whatever challenges awaited us, we would face them side by side. The forest whispered around us, its gratitude and renewed vitality a balm to our weary spirits. We had made our choice, paid the price, and emerged transformed. As Lisa and I emerged from the cave, blinking in the bright sunlight, we were struck speechless by the transformation before us. The forest, which had been withering under the influence of corruption just hours ago, now pulsed with vibrant life and energy. The trees stood taller, their leaves a richer green than I'd ever seen. Flowers bloomed in brilliant bursts of color, and the air was filled with the songs of returning birds. It's incredible, Lisa breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. I can feel it, Tom. The forest is singing. I nodded, equally awestruck. The connection to the land that we'd developed during our trials now felt stronger than ever. I could sense the flow of life energy through every tree, every blade of grass. It was overwhelming and beautiful. The shimmering form of Eldrath materialized before us, its bear-like shape radiating approval and pride. Well done, young guardians. Your sacrifice has driven back the corruption and sparked a rebirth of the forest. Thank you, Eldrath, I said, bowing my head slightly. We couldn't have done it without your guidance. Lisa stepped forward, her face etched with a mix of gratitude and concern. Is it over then? Have we defeated the corruption for good? Eldrath's form rippled, a gesture I'd come to recognize as the equivalent of a sigh. I'm afraid not, child. You have won a great victory, but the battle against the darkness is never truly over. The corruption has been driven back, but not destroyed. It will return, in time, perhaps in new and unexpected forms. The weight of Eldrath's words settled over us. Our journey, it seemed, was far from over. But do not let that diminish your accomplishment, Eldrath continued, its voice warm with encouragement. You have proven yourselves true guardians of the forest. The land recognizes your sacrifice and has rewarded you accordingly. As if on cue, I felt a surge of energy course through my body. Beside me, Lisa gasped, clearly experiencing the same sensation. What's happening? I asked, watching in amazement as faint, glowing patterns appeared on my skin, reminiscent of the bioluminescent markings we'd seen on some of the forest creatures. Eldrath's form brightened. The forest has imbued you with a fraction of its power, and mine. You are now more deeply connected to this land than any humans have been for centuries. This gift will aid you in your continued role as guardians. Lisa flexed her fingers, small sparks of natural energy dancing between them. It's incredible, she said softly. I can feel the life force of everything around us so clearly now. I nodded, experiencing the same heightened awareness. The forest felt like an extension of my own body, its rhythms syncing with my heartbeat. Use this power wisely, Eldrath cautioned. It is a great responsibility as well as a gift. You must continue to learn and grow in your roles as guardians. We will, I promised solemnly. But what happens now? How do we go back to our normal lives after all this? It was a question that had been nagging at me since we'd emerged from the cave. How could we return to our jobs, our everyday routines, knowing what we now knew, feeling what we now felt? Eldrath's form shimmered thoughtfully. Your lives will never be quite normal again, young guardians. But that doesn't mean you must abandon your place in the human world. In fact, it's crucial that you don't. You will be the bridge between two realms, protecting the forest while also guiding your fellow humans towards a better understanding of nature. Lisa squeezed my hand, a determined look in her eyes. We can do this, Tom. Together. I squeezed back, drawing strength from her presence. Together, I agreed. With a final nod of approval, Eldrath's form began to fade. Go now, and rest. You have earned it. But remain vigilant, and know that I will call upon you when you are needed. As Eldrath disappeared, Lisa and I stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the enormity of our new reality. Then, with a shared look of determination, we began the long trek back toward civilization. The journey through the reborn forest was nothing short of magical. Every step brought new wonders as we experienced the land through our enhanced senses. We could feel the water flowing through the roots of trees, sense the complex network of fungal threads connecting the entire ecosystem. It's like seeing the world in color for the first time after a lifetime of black and white, Lisa mused, as we paused by a bubbling stream. She dipped her hand in the water, and I watched in amazement as the liquid seemed to dance around her fingers, responding to her newfound connection with nature. I nodded, still somewhat overwhelmed by it all. It's beautiful, but also a lot to take in. How are we going to explain any of this when we get back? Lisa's expression grew serious. I've been thinking about that. Maybe we don't explain, at least not everything. We keep the full extent of what happened to ourselves. Just say we got lost in the woods for a while. And the glowing tattoos? I asked, gesturing to the faint luminescent patterns that still adorned our skin. She shrugged. They seem to fade when we're not actively using our powers. As long as we're careful, we should be able to keep them hidden. As we continued our hike, we discussed the practicalities of our new lives. How would we balance our duties as guardians with our jobs and relationships? Could we use our new abilities to help in subtle ways without revealing our secret? We were so engrossed in our conversation that we almost didn't notice when we reached the edge of the forest. The transition was jarring, from the vibrant, pulsing energy of the reborn woods to the relative silence of the human world. Well, I said, taking a deep breath, I guess this is it. Back to reality. Lisa nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. It feels strange, doesn't it? Like we're leaving a part of ourselves behind. I was about to respond when a sudden chill ran down my spine. The newfound connection to the forest screamed a warning in my mind, and I instinctively dropped into a defensive stance. Tom? Lisa asked, alarmed by my sudden change in demeanor. What's wrong? I don't know, I said, my eyes scanning the tree line. But something's not right. Can't you feel it? Lisa closed her eyes, concentrating. When she opened them again, they were wide with concern. You're right. It's like a void, an absence where there should be life. As if on cue, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. At first glance, it appeared to be a normal hiker, but as it drew closer, we could see the telltale signs of corruption. Eyes that glowed with an unnatural light, skin that seemed to ripple and shift in impossible ways. Well, well, the figure said, its voice a discordant blend of human speech and something altogether alien. The forest's new pets, I presume. How quaint. I felt Lisa tense beside me, ready for action. Who are you? I demanded, channeling energy into my hands, prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. The figure's mouth twisted into a grotesque parody of a smile. Who I am is irrelevant. What matters is what I represent. You may have driven back the corruption in the heart of the forest, but you've barely scratched the surface of what's to come. We defeated your kind once, Lisa said defiantly. We'll do it again. The corrupted being laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Oh, you have no idea what you're up against, little guardians. The darkness you faced in that cave was but a drop in the ocean. Our influence spreads far beyond this forest, seeping into the very foundations of your civilization. As it spoke, I became aware of movement in the periphery of my vision. More corrupted figures were emerging from the woods surrounding us. Tom? Lisa whispered urgently. We're outnumbered. I nodded grimly, assessing our options. We were stronger now, imbued with the forest's power, but we were also exhausted from our ordeal in the cave. And there was no telling how powerful these new enemies might be. The lead figure spread its arms wide, its form seeming to grow and distort. You have a choice, Guardians. Join us willingly, embrace the power we offer, or watch as we tear down everything you love, piece by piece. I shared a quick glance with Lisa, seeing my own determination reflected in her eyes. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. We've made our choice, I said firmly, raising my hands as natural energy crackled between my fingers. We stand with the forest. Lisa nodded, taking up a fighting stance beside me. And we will protect it no matter the cost. The corrupted being's eyes flared with malevolent glee. So be it. As our enemies closed in, the forest at our backs seemed to pulse with renewed energy, lending us strength. We had hoped for a moment of peace, a chance to catch our breath after our first great trial. But it was clear now that our journey as guardians was only just beginning. With the power of nature flowing through us and the bond between us stronger than ever, Lisa and I prepared to face this new threat. The drive back into town was surreal. After days immersed in the primal energy of the forest, the sight of buildings, cars, and bustling streets felt alien. But as we approached the outskirts of our small mountain community, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. Tom, look, Lisa gasped, pointing out the window. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. Dark, twisting vines covered several buildings, their unnatural growth defying all laws of nature. People moved through the streets with jerky, almost robotic motions, their eyes glazed over. It spread, I whispered, horror dawning. The corruptions reached the town. We pulled into the town square, parking haphazardly as we took in the full extent of the chaos. The Central Park, once a lush green space, was now a twisted mockery of nature. The trees had grown into grotesque shapes, their bark oozing a sickly phosphorescent sap. At the center, The old fountain burbled with what looked unsettlingly like blood. A group of townspeople noticed our arrival, turning towards us with eerie synchronicity. Their leader, a man I recognized as the local baker, stepped forward. His eyes glowed with the same otherworldly light we'd seen in the corrupted forest creatures. "Welcome home," he said, his voice a dissonant blend of human speech and something altogether alien. "We've been expecting you." Lisa and I exchanged a quick glance, silently agreeing on our course of action. We stepped out of the car, channeling the forest's energy into a protective barrier around us. "What have you done to these people?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear from my voice. The baker's face twisted into an unnatural grin. "Done? We've liberated them, opened their eyes to a greater purpose. Soon, the whole world will share in our evolution." As he spoke, more townspeople began to converge on us, moving with an unsettling fluidity that belied their human appearance. I could feel the corrupt energy radiating from them, a dark mirror of the natural power flowing through Lisa and me. "We need to do something," Lisa murmured, her hands glowing faintly with forest magic. "We can't let this spread any further." I nodded grimly. "But how? There are so many of them, and we don't know how to undo this corruption on such a large scale." Before we could formulate a plan, the corrupted townspeople attacked. They moved within human speed and strength, forcing us into a desperate defensive battle. Lisa and I fought back to back, using our newfound abilities to repel the onslaught. I summoned vines from the cracked pavement, using them to entangle our attackers. Lisa created gusts of wind that knocked the corrupted people back, buying us precious moments to catch our breath. But for every opponent we subdued, two more seemed to take their place. As the battle raged on, I couldn't help but think of how different our lives had become in such a short time. Just days ago, we were ordinary people with ordinary jobs and ordinary problems. Now we were in the middle of a supernatural war, fighting to save our town, and possibly the world, from an incomprehensible threat. "Tom, behind you!" Lisa's warning snapped me back to the present. I spun just in time to see the corrupted baker lunging at me, his hands morphed into wicked claws. Instinctively, I called upon the forest's power, feeling it surge through me. A burst of pure natural energy erupted from my palms, striking the baker square in the chest. To my amazement, the corrupted energy surrounding him seemed to dissipate. He collapsed to the ground unconscious, but looking more human than he had moments ago. "Lisa," I called out, excitement building. "I think I found a way to purify them." She nodded, understanding immediately. Together we focused our efforts on channeling the forest's energy not just defensively, but as a cleansing force. One by one, we began to free our neighbors from the corruption's grip. It was exhausting work, draining our newfound powers to their limit. But slowly, the tide of battle turned. As more people were freed, they began to help us subdue those still under the corruption's influence. Hours later, as the sun began to set, we stood in the center of town, surrounded by dazed but thankfully human townspeople. The corrupt growth that had overtaken the buildings was withering away, leaving only faint scars as evidence of its presence. "You did it," a voice said behind us. We turned to see Sheriff Anderson approaching, looking worn but grateful. "I don't understand exactly what happened here, but I know you two saved us all." I shared a weary smile with Lisa. "We just did what we had to do," she said modestly. The sheriff shook his head in amazement. "Well, whatever you did, we owe you a debt of gratitude. But what was that thing? And is it over?" The smile faded from my face as I considered his questions. "I'm afraid it's not over, Sheriff. This was just one manifestation of a much larger problem, and we need to figure out how it spread here from the forest." Over the next few weeks, Lisa and I found ourselves thrust into the role of reluctant heroes. We worked tirelessly to help the town recover, using our abilities to accelerate the healing of the land and to watch for any resurgence of the corruption. But even as we threw ourselves into this work, I found myself struggling with the weight of our new responsibility. Late one night, as we sat on the porch of my small cabin on the edge of town, I finally voiced the doubts that had been gnawing at me. "Lisa," I said softly, "do you ever wish we could go back to our old lives before all of this?" She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the forest looming in the distance. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It was simpler then, but I don't think I could ever be truly happy going back to ignorance. Not now that we know what's at stake." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. We had been changed not just by the forest's power, but by the knowledge of the wider world it had revealed to us. Our conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from one of our newfound allies, a local scientist who had been helping us investigate the corruption's spread. What she revealed shook us to our core. "You need to see this," Dr. Amelia Chen said, her voice tense as she spread out a series of documents on her lab table. "I've been analyzing samples of the corrupted growth and cross-referencing them with global environmental data. This isn't isolated to our forest or even our region. There are signs of similar corruption popping up all over the world." She pointed to a map dotted with red markers. "These are confirmed sightings of anomalous growth or behavior similar to what we experienced here. And look at this. Many of these locations correspond with sites of major industrial or technological development." A chill ran down my spine as the implications became clear. "You're saying this is global? That the corruption is somehow tied to human activity?" Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "It's like the planet itself is reacting to the damage we've done, but in a way that's been twisted, corrupted, and there's more. I found evidence of an organization that seems to be actively cultivating and spreading the corruption." She pulled up a series of encrypted emails and financial records. They call themselves the Verdant Dawn. From what I can gather, they believe they're ushering in a new age of human evolution, merging humanity with this corrupt version of nature. Lisa's face paled as she examined the documents. "This is bigger than we ever imagined. How can we possibly fight something on this scale?" As if in answer to her question, we felt a familiar presence brush against our minds. Eldrath's voice, faint but clear, echoed in our thoughts. "Young Guardians," the ancient spirit said, its tone urgent. "You have discovered the true extent of the threat we face. But there is more you must know. The corruption you fight is not merely a force of nature gone wrong. It is the result of an ancient conflict, one that has raged since the dawn of time." Images flashed through our minds, glimpses of primordial forests, of battles between forces of pure nature and twisted, corrupted entities. We saw the rise and fall of civilizations, each one tipping the balance between preservation and exploitation. The Verdant Dawn is but the latest manifestation of those who would pervert the natural order for their own gain, Eldrath continued. They have rediscovered old magics, tapping into the same corrupt power that nearly destroyed the world eons ago. The final image Eldrath showed us was of a network of ley lines crisscrossing the globe, pulsing with energy. "You are not alone in this fight, young Guardians. Across the world, others like you are awakening to their connection with nature. You must find them, unite them. For only together can you hope to stem the tide of corruption and restore balance to the world." As Eldrath's presence faded, Lisa and I stood in stunned silence, the weight of this new knowledge pressing down on us. We had thought our duty was to a single forest, but now we understood the true scale of our mission. "What do we do now?" Lisa asked, her voice small but determined. I took her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "We do what Guardians do. We protect, we heal, and we fight. And we find others like us. This isn't just about our forest anymore. It's about the fate of the entire world." As we looked out over our small town, now peaceful in the evening light, I knew that our greatest challenges still lay ahead. The corruption was spreading, the Verdant Dawn was moving forward with their plans, and we were racing against time to build a force capable of stopping them. But for the first time since this all began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't alone in this fight. And with the power of nature on our side and the bonds between us stronger than ever, I believed we stood a chance of saving not just our forest, but the world itself. The sun set on our small mountain town, casting long shadows across the land. But as darkness fell, the faint ethereal glow of our forest-given power reminded us that even in the deepest night, there is always a spark of light. The forest whispered its ancient secrets as Lisa and I stood at its edge, the weight of years and responsibility settling comfortably on our shoulders. The warm summer breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, a familiar aroma that never failed to take me back to that fateful day when our lives changed forever. I turned to Lisa, her silver-streaked hair glinting in the dappled sunlight. The years had been kind to her, etching only the faintest of lines around her eyes that still sparkled with the same determination and wonder I'd fallen in love with decades ago. "Ready?" I asked, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Lisa nodded, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "As ready as we'll ever be, I suppose, though I have to admit, I'm a bit nervous." I chuckled softly. "After everything we've been through, this is what makes you nervous." "This is different," she replied, her gaze drifting to the small group of young adults gathered nearby, their excited chatter carrying on the wind. "We're not just protecting the forest anymore. We're shaping the future." I followed her gaze, studying the faces of our students, the next generation of guardians. Each of them had been carefully chosen, having displayed a natural affinity for the magic that pulsed through the earth beneath our feet. They were young, eager, and completely unaware of the weight they would soon bear. "They remind me of us," I mused. "Do you remember how clueless we were?" Lisa laughed, the sound as melodious as the day I first heard it. "How could I forget? We nearly got ourselves killed a dozen times over." As if summoned by our reminiscence, a familiar roar echoed through the trees. The students fell silent, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Was that—" one of them, a young woman named Zara, asked hesitantly. I nodded, a grin spreading across my face. "That would be an old friend of ours. Don't worry, his bark is worse than his bite. Most of the time." Lisa rolled her eyes at my poor attempt at humor before addressing the group. "All right, everyone, this is it. The moment you step into this forest, your lives will change forever. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this?" The students exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. It was Eli, the youngest of the group, who spoke up first. "We've been training for this our whole lives. We're ready." The others nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. We had chosen well. "Very well," I said, my voice taking on a more serious tone. "Follow us and remember everything we've taught you. The forest may seem peaceful, but danger lurks in every shadow. Stay alert, stay together, and above all, trust in the magic within you." With that, Lisa and I turned and stepped into the cool shade of the forest. The students followed close behind, their excitement palpable in the air around us. As we walked, I couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought us to this point. The years following our initial encounter with the guardian bear had been a whirlwind of adventure, danger, and discovery. We had traveled the world, combating the darkness that threatened to consume not just our forest but the entire planet. We had faced down corrupt corporations, battled ancient evils, and even stood against governments that sought to exploit the Earth's magic for their own gain. Along the way, we had made allies and enemies, lost friends and found new ones. But through it all, Lisa and I had remained constant, our bond growing stronger with each passing year. Now, as we led our students deeper into the heart of the forest, I felt a sense of completion. We had come full circle, returning to where it all began to pass on our knowledge and ensure the protection of the natural world for generations to come. The familiar whisper of the trees surrounded us, a language we had long since learned to understand. I glanced at Lisa, seeing the same contentment in her eyes that I felt in my heart. Suddenly, the forest around us fell silent. The students tensed, instinctively drawing closer together. "What's happening?" Zara whispered, her hand hovering near the pouch of herbs at her waist. a tool we had taught them to use for quick spellcasting. Before I could answer, the air before us shimmered, and a massive form materialized. The guardian bear, as magnificent and awe-inspiring as the day we first encountered him, stood before us. The students gasped collectively, but to their credit, none of them ran. I felt another surge of pride at their bravery. "Welcome, young ones," the bear's voice rumbled, his eyes glowing with that same otherworldly intelligence. "I have been waiting for you." Lisa stepped forward, bowing her head slightly in respect. "Old friend, it's good to see you again. We've brought them, as promised." The bear's gaze swept over the group, assessing each student in turn. "Yes, I see great potential in them, but potential alone is not enough. They must be tested, as you were." I nodded, having expected this. "We understand. They're ready." "Are we?" Eli piped up, his voice quavering slightly. "What kind of test?" The bear turned his attention to the young man. "The forest itself will test you, young one. It will challenge your mind, body, and spirit. Only those who prove worthy will be granted the power to protect it." Another student, Marcus, stepped forward. "But we've been training for years. Surely that counts for something." The bear's laugh was like rolling thunder. "Training is but the first step on a long journey. True wisdom comes from experience, from facing your fears and overcoming them. Are you prepared to do that?" The students exchanged nervous glances, but one by one, they nodded their assent. "Very well," the bear said. "Then let the trials begin." With a wave of his massive paw, the forest around us transformed. The familiar paths disappeared, replaced by a maze of twisting vines and towering trees. The very air seemed to shimmer with magic. "Each of you will face your own unique challenges," the bear explained. "Trust in yourselves and in each other. Remember the lessons you have learned, and you will prevail." As the students prepared themselves, Lisa turned to me, worry etched on her face. "Do you think they're truly ready for this?" I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "They're as ready as we can make them. The rest is up to them now." We watched as our students ventured into the magical labyrinth, each taking a different path. The forest seemed to swallow them up, leaving Lisa and I alone with the guardian bear. "You have done well," the bear said, his voice softer now. "The forest has flourished under your protection." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a lump form in my throat. "But I can't help feeling like our work is far from over." The bear's eyes twinkled with something akin to amusement. "Your work will never be over, old friends. The duty of a guardian is eternal, but do not fear. You have earned a rest." Lisa looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Your time as active guardians is coming to an end," the bear explained. "You have trained your successors well. Now, it is time for you to take on a new role, that of mentors and advisors." I felt a mix of emotions wash over me, relief, sadness, and a touch of fear. But what if they need us? What if something goes wrong? The bear's expression softened. "They will always need you, but in a different capacity. You have given them the tools they need to succeed. Now you must have faith in them, just as I had faith in you all those years ago." As if on cue, we heard shouts and laughter echoing from different parts of the forest. One by one, our students emerged from their trials, their faces flushed with exertion and triumph. Zara was the first to reach us, her eyes wide with wonder. That was incredible. I've never felt so connected to the forest before. The others soon joined her, each recounting their experiences with breathless excitement. As I listened to their stories, I realized that the bear was right. They were ready. Lisa seemed to sense my thoughts, leaning into me as we watched our students celebrate their success. "It's really happening, isn't it?" she murmured. "We're passing the torch." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "We are. But our greatest adventure is just beginning." As the sun began to set, painting the forest in hues of gold and crimson, I looked at the faces of our young guardians, full of hope, determination, and the same sense of wonder that had driven Lisa and me all these years. The forest whispered around us, ancient and eternal, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, the world was in good hands. Our legacy would live on, and the magic of the forest would continue to thrive, protected by a new generation of guardians. And as for Lisa and me, well, we had a whole new chapter of our lives to look forward to. After all, who better to guide the next generation than those who had walked the path before them? With a smile, I took Lisa's hand, and together we stepped forward into our new role, ready to face whatever adventures the future might hold. The mist clung to the ancient trees of the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest like a shroud, muffling my footsteps as I made my way deeper into the wilderness. My excitement grew with each step, the damp air filled with the promise of scientific discovery. As a botanist, I'd spent years studying the diverse plant life of this region, but today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that something extraordinary awaited me in the depths of this primeval forest. I paused, consulting the GPS on my phone. Just a little further, I muttered to myself, pushing aside a low-hanging branch. The coordinates I'd received from a fellow researcher pointed to a small clearing up ahead, supposedly home to a species of flower never before catalogued. As I approached the clearing, the mist began to thin, revealing a carpet of vibrant undergrowth. My breath caught in my throat as I spotted a cluster of flowers unlike anything I'd ever seen. Their petals were an impossible shade of blue, almost luminescent in the filtered sunlight. "Incredible," I whispered, kneeling down to examine them more closely. My fingers trembled with anticipation as I reached out to touch one of the blossoms. The moment my skin made contact, I gasped. The petals were softer than silk, almost fluid beneath my touch. Carefully, I removed a small specimen container from my backpack. "You, my beautiful friend, are coming with me," I said, gently grasping the stem of one of the flowers. As I began to pluck it from the earth, the air around me suddenly filled with a sound that froze my blood. A scream. High-pitched and agonized, it pierced the quiet of the forest like a knife. I jerked my hand back, the specimen container slipping from my grasp and clattering to the ground. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled backward, eyes darting around the clearing. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Is someone there?" But the scream hadn't come from a person. My gaze fell back to the flower I had attempted to pick, and I watched in horror as a thick red liquid began to ooze from its stem. Blood. The flower was bleeding. "This isn't possible," I mumbled, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. But when I looked again, the blood was still there, now forming a small pool around the base of the plant. Swallowing hard, I leaned in for a closer look. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper at the edge of my consciousness. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling through the leaves, but as I concentrated, the whisper grew clearer. "Please, stop. Pain." I jerked back, nearly losing my balance. "Who said that?" I demanded, spinning around to search the clearing once more. But I was alone, save for the flowers at my feet. The whisper came again, more insistent this time. "No more. Hurt. Please." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the impossible truth. The voice was coming from the flowers themselves. I'm sorry," I stammered, addressing the injured plant. "I didn't know you could feel." As if in response, a wave of emotion washed over me. Fear, pain, and a desperate plea for mercy. It was as if the flowers were projecting their thoughts directly into my mind. I sat back on the forest floor, my head spinning. "This can't be happening," I said aloud, trying to make sense of the situation. Plants don't bleed, they don't scream, and they certainly don't talk. But the evidence was right in front of me, impossible to deny. I had stumbled upon something extraordinary, a species of plant that was not only sentient but capable of telepathic communication. As my initial shock began to subside, my scientific curiosity took over. I pulled out my notebook and began to sketch the flowers, careful not to touch them again. "Can you understand me?" I asked softly, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a plant. A gentle warmth spread through my mind, accompanied by a sense of affirmation. They could understand. "My name is Mia," I continued, still scarcely believing what was happening. "I'm a botanist, someone who studies plants. I've never encountered anything like you before. Can you tell me more about yourselves?" The response came not in words, but in a series of vivid images that flashed through my mind. I saw the flowers growing, communicating with each other through an intricate network of roots and fungi. I glimpsed fleeting impressions of other creatures, insects, birds, and small mammals, interacting with the plants in complex ways. As the visions faded, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I had just experienced. The implications of this discovery were staggering. If these plants were sentient and capable of communication, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. But with that realization came a sense of dread. What would happen if the wrong people found out about these flowers? They would be exploited, experimented on, maybe even destroyed out of fear. "I won't let that happen," I said firmly, addressing the flowers once more. "I'll protect you. I'll find a way to communicate what I've learned without putting you in danger." A wave of gratitude washed over me, followed by a sense of urgency. The flowers were trying to tell me something else. "What is it?" I asked, leaning in closer. Suddenly, I became aware of movement at the edge of the clearing. Dark shapes shifted in the mist, just out of sight. A feeling of unease crept over me, amplified by the flowers' growing agitation. "We are not alone," a voice whispered in my mind, clearer than before. "Danger comes. You must go." I scrambled to my feet, hastily shoving my notebook into my backpack. "I'll come back," I promised the flowers. "I'll find a way to help you." As I turned to leave, I felt a final surge of emotion from the plants, a mixture of hope and fear that mirrored my own conflicted feelings. I had made an incredible discovery, but I had also stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than I could have imagined. With one last look at the extraordinary flowers, I plunged back into the misty forest. My mind raced with questions and possibilities as I made my way back to civilization, unaware that my life had just changed forever. The fluorescent lights of my lab hummed softly as I hunched over my workstation, my hands trembling as I carefully placed the sample onto the microscope stage. The events in the forest still felt surreal, like a vivid dream I couldn't shake off. But the evidence was right here, under my fingertips, a small cutting from one of those impossible, screaming flowers. "Okay," I muttered to myself, taking a deep breath. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." As I peered through the eyepiece, adjusting the focus, the flower's cellular structure came into view. What I saw made me gasp audibly. "This can't be right," I whispered, rubbing my eyes and looking again. The cells before me defied everything I knew about plant biology. They were incredibly complex, with structures I'd never seen before. There were organelles that resembled neurons, intricate networks that looked almost like a miniature nervous system. I grabbed my phone, quickly dialing my colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen. "Sarah, it's Mia. I need you to come to the lab right away. I've found something unprecedented." "Mia, it's 2 a.m. What are you talking about?" Sarah's voice was groggy with sleep. "I know, I'm sorry, but this can't wait. Please, just come as soon as you can." I hung up and turned back to the microscope, my mind racing. How could plants have evolved structures like these? And more importantly, how could they result in consciousness and telepathic abilities? As I adjusted the magnification, a strange impulse overcame me. I reached out and gently touched the flower sample with my bare hand. The moment my skin made contact, the world around me disappeared in a flood of vivid images and sensations. I saw the forest floor from below, feeling the nutrients flow through a vast network of roots and fungi. I experienced the slow, steady growth of stems and leaves reaching towards the sunlight. I felt the vibrations of insects walking across petals, the gentle caress of the wind, the nourishing fall of rain. But it was more than just physical sensations. I felt awareness, consciousness, a sense of self and others, of community and communication. The flowers were sharing their memories with me, showing me their world. Suddenly the vision shifted. I saw a hidden realm beneath the forest, a complex ecosystem of plant life that pulsed with awareness. Bioluminescent fungi glowed softly, creating an otherworldly landscape. Plants communicated through a web of electrical signals and chemical exchanges, sharing information and resources. As quickly as it began, the vision faded. I found myself back in my lab, gasping for air, my hand still touching the flower sample. "Mia, are you okay?" I jumped at the sound of Sarah's voice. She stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Sarah, Yes, I'm fine. Come here, you need to see this." As Sarah approached, I felt a lingering connection to the flower, as if it was still reaching out to me, trying to communicate. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked, peering into the microscope. I explained what I had seen, both under the microscope and in my vision. As I spoke, Sarah's expression changed from skepticism to amazement. "Mia, if what you're saying is true, it could change everything we know about plant biology, about consciousness itself." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "But there's more. These plants, they're not just conscious. They can communicate telepathically. They showed me things, Sarah. Their memories, their world." Sarah took a step back, her brow furrowed. "Mia, listen to yourself. Telepathic plants, hidden underground worlds. Are you sure you're feeling all right?" I felt a flash of frustration. "I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you the truth. Here, let me show you." I reached for Sarah's hand, intending to place it on the flower sample, but she pulled away. "Mia, stop. You need to take a step back and think about this rationally. We need to run more tests, get more samples. We can't jump to conclusions based on one specimen and hallucinations." "They weren't hallucinations," I snapped, then took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Look, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm asking you to trust me, at least enough to keep an open mind while we investigate further." Sarah sighed, then nodded. "All right, let's start with some basic tests. We'll document the cellular structure, run some chemical analyses, but Mia, we need to keep this quiet for now. If word gets out about what you're claiming—" "I know," I said, remembering the sense of danger I'd felt in the forest. "We need to be careful." As we began our tests, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something monumental. The flower sample seemed to pulse with hidden knowledge, secrets waiting to be uncovered. Hours passed in a blur of activity. We documented the unusual cellular structures, ran chemical analyses, and even attempted to capture electrical signals from the sample. The results were fascinating, showing patterns of activity more complex than anything we'd seen in plants before. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the lab windows, Sarah sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. "Mia, these results, they're incredible. I've never seen anything like this before, but we need more data, more samples." I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We need to go back to the forest. There's so much more to learn." Sarah looked at me, concern evident in her eyes. "Are you sure that's safe? You mentioned feeling like you were being watched when you left." I hesitated, remembering the dark shapes I'd glimpsed at the edge of the clearing. "We'll be careful. But we can't stop now, Sarah. This could be the discovery of a lifetime." As I spoke, I felt a gentle nudge at the edge of my consciousness. The flower was reaching out again, its presence a soft whisper in my mind. "There's so much more they want to show us," I said softly, placing my hand on the sample container. "So much we need to understand." Sarah watched me, a mix of fascination and worry on her face. "Mia, I hope you know what you're doing. This isn't just about scientific discovery anymore. If these plants are really sentient, really capable of communication, it raises all sorts of ethical questions. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. I know, but that's all the more reason to continue our research. We need to understand them if we're going to protect them. As I spoke, another vision flashed through my mind. The hidden world beneath the forest, teeming with life and awareness. But this time, I saw something else. A sense of urgency, of impending threat. We need to hurry, I said, my voice tight with sudden anxiety. I think they're in danger. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The plants? What kind of danger? I shook my head, struggling to articulate the feeling. I'm not sure, but we need to get back to the forest as soon as possible. As we began to pack up our equipment for another expedition, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were embarking on a journey that would change not just our understanding of plant life, but our entire perception of consciousness and our place in the natural world. The flower sample sat on the lab bench, a silent sentinel holding the key to untold secrets. As I carefully packed it away, I felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers we might face, I knew one thing for certain. I would do everything in my power to uncover the truth about these extraordinary plants and protect them from whatever threat loomed on the horizon. With one last look at the lab, we stepped out into the early morning light, ready to plunge back into the mysterious world hidden within the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest. The early morning mist clung to the trees as Sarah and I made our way back into the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest. The weight of our backpacks filled with scientific equipment reminded me of the gravity of our mission. We were no longer just botanists on a routine expedition. We were explorers on the brink of a discovery that could change everything. "Are you sure this is the right way, Mia?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I nodded, my eyes scanning the forest floor. "Yes, I remember these markings. We're close to the clearing where I first found the flowers." As we pushed deeper into the forest, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The woods seemed different now, charged with an eerie awareness that sent shivers down my spine. The rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs under our feet seemed amplified, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, watching our every move. "Do you feel that?" I whispered to Sarah, my voice barely audible above the sound of our footsteps. She looked at me, her brow furrowed. "Feel what?" "It's like the forest is alive. Really alive. Aware." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, we emerged into a small clearing. There, bathed in the soft morning light, was a sea of the luminous blue flowers I had encountered before. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mia, they're beautiful." As we stepped into the clearing, the air seemed to vibrate with energy. The collective whispers of the flowers grew louder in my mind, a chorus of voices that both welcomed and warned. "Hello," I said softly, addressing the flowers. "We've come to learn, to understand. We mean you no harm." Sarah shot me a concerned look. "Mia, are you talking to the flowers?" I nodded, not taking my eyes off the gently swaying blooms. "They can hear us, Sarah. They're trying to communicate." Carefully, we began to set up our equipment. As Sarah prepared to take soil samples, I knelt down beside a cluster of flowers, my hand hovering just above their petals. "May I?" I asked, both aloud and in my mind. A wave of assent washed over me, and I gently touched one of the flowers. Immediately, my mind was flooded with images and sensations. I saw the forest through the flower's perception, a vast, interconnected network of life. I felt the ebb and flow of nutrients through the soil, the subtle changes in temperature and humidity. But beneath the beauty, there was an undercurrent of fear. "Something's wrong," I gasped, pulling my hand back. "They're afraid." Sarah looked up from her soil sample. "Afraid of what?" Before I could answer, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. Dark figures, barely distinguishable from the shadows of the trees, seemed to shift and move. "Sarah," I said, my voice low and urgent, "we're not alone." As if in response to my words, the whispers in my mind grew more insistent, a cacophony of warnings and pleas. "We need to leave," I said, hastily gathering our samples. "Now." "But we've barely started," Sarah protested. "We need more data." "No time," I cut her off, shoving equipment into my backpack. "Trust me, we need to go." As we hurriedly packed up, the sense of being watched intensified. The dark figures at the edge of the clearing seemed to be closing in, their movements deliberate and menacing. "Run!" I yelled, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her towards the path we had come from. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces as we fled. The whispers of the flowers followed us, a psychic trail leading us away from danger. "Mia, what's happening?" Sarah panted as we ran. "I don't know," I gasped. "But whatever those things are, the flowers are terrified of them." As we ran, I clutched the samples we had managed to collect, determined not to lose this precious evidence. The forest around us seemed to come alive, branches reaching out as if to impede our pursuers, roots rising to trip them. "The forest!" Sarah gasped in amazement. "It's helping us?" I nodded, too out of breath to speak. The sentient network of plant life was rallying to our defense, buying us precious seconds to escape. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, we burst out of the forest and onto the road where we had parked our car. Without a word, we threw ourselves into the vehicle, and I gunned the engine, peeling away from the forest's edge. As we sped down the winding road, Sarah turned to look behind us. "I don't see anyone following," she said, her voice shaky. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. "They might not need to," I said. "I have a feeling they know exactly where we're going." We drove in tense silence for several miles before Sarah spoke again. "Mia, what were those things back there?" I shook my head, my mind racing. "I don't know. But whatever they are, they're a threat to the flowers, to the entire forest." "But why? And how? None of this makes any sense." I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. "Think about it, Sarah. If these plants are truly sentient, truly capable of communication and possibly even manipulation of their environment, imagine what that could mean. The scientific implications alone are staggering, but think about the potential applications. Pharmaceutical companies would kill for access to plants with advanced neural structures. And that's not even considering the military or industrial possibilities." Sarah's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You think someone else knows about the flowers? That they're trying to... what? Harvest them? Destroy them?" I nodded grimly. "It's possible. And if that's the case, we might be the only ones standing between these sentient beings and exploitation or extinction." As we neared the city limits, I felt a subtle shift in my mind, like a door slowly closing. The psychic connection to the forest was fading, but not before one last message came through, a mixture of gratitude, fear, and a desperate plea for help. "We can't abandon them," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We have to find a way to protect them." Sarah reached out and squeezed my arm. "We will, Mia. But first we need to understand what we're dealing with, and we need to be careful. If someone is after these plants, they might come after us too." I nodded, my mind already racing with plans and possibilities. As we pulled into the parking lot of our lab, I knew that our lives had irrevocably changed. We were no longer just scientists. We had become guardians of a secret that could change the world. With trembling hands, I gathered the samples we had collected. "Let's get these analyzed as quickly as possible," I said. "We need to know everything we can about these plants if we're going to help them." As we walked into the lab, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The memory of those dark figures lurking at the edge of the clearing haunted me. I knew that our discovery had set in motion events that were far beyond our control. But as I placed the samples under the microscope, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers we might face, I knew one thing for certain. I would do everything in my power to uncover the truth about these extraordinary plants and protect them from the threats that loomed on the horizon. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as I stood at the podium, my hands trembling slightly as I arranged my notes. My colleagues, some of the most respected botanists and biologists in the field, watched me with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what I knew would be a challenging presentation. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything we thought we knew about plant biology and, indeed, about consciousness itself." As I launched into my presentation, detailing the extraordinary properties of the flowers we'd discovered in the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest, I could see the expressions of my colleagues shift from interest to disbelief and, in some cases, outright derision. "Are you seriously suggesting these plants are sentient?" Dr. Reginald Thompson, a stern-faced senior botanist, interrupted. "And telepathic, no less? This is preposterous." I held up my hands, trying to calm the murmurs that had broken out. "I know it sounds incredible, but I have evidence. The cellular structures alone are unlike anything we've ever seen in plants. And the chemical analyses that could easily be explained by more mundane factors." Dr. Lisa Chen cut in, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Mia, I expected better from you. This is the kind of pseudoscience that damages our entire field." As the criticisms mounted, I felt my confidence wavering. Even Sarah, who had witnessed some of the phenomena herself, remained silent, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. "Please," I said, my voice rising with desperation, "if you'd just look at the data." But it was too late. The room had erupted into heated discussions, with most of my colleagues either dismissing my claims outright or speculating about what might have led me to such outlandish conclusions. As I gathered my materials and fled the conference room, I could hear Dr. Thompson's voice booming behind me. "I expected better from you, Dr. Chen. This kind of sensationalism has no place in serious scientific discourse." That night I sat in my darkened apartment, staring at my computer screen. The harsh criticism of my colleagues still rang in my ears, but I couldn't shake the certainty of what I'd experienced. The sentient plants were real and they needed protection. A ping from my email jolted me from my thoughts. A new message had arrived, sender unknown. With a sense of foreboding, I opened it. The message was brief and chilling. "Stop your research now. Forget what you saw in the forest. This is your only warning." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Someone knew about my discovery, someone who didn't want the truth to come out. My mind raced back to the dark figures we'd seen in the forest. Were they behind this? I picked up my phone, dialing Sarah's number with shaking fingers. "Sarah? It's Mia. I just received a threat. Someone knows about our research, and they want us to stop." Sarah's voice was tight with concern. "Are you sure, Mia? Maybe it's just a prank." "No, this is real. We need to be careful. Can you meet me at the lab tomorrow? We need to secure our samples and data." The next day, as I approached the lab, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, and a strange, earthy smell wafted from inside. Cautiously, I pushed the door open and gasped at the sight that greeted me. The lab was in disarray, equipment scattered and broken. But what truly shocked me was the plant growth that seemed to have sprung up overnight. Vines and tendrils crept across the walls and floor, centering around the area where we'd kept our samples. "What on earth?" I muttered, carefully picking my way through the growth. As I neared our storage unit, my heart sank. The cabinet had been forced open, and our precious samples were gone. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, her face paling as she took in the scene. "Mia, what happened here?" I shook my head, still in shock. "I don't know. But our samples are gone, and look at this growth. It's almost as if..." As if the plants are trying to tell us something, Sarah finished, her voice barely a whisper. Over the next few days, strange occurrences continued to plague the lab. Equipment malfunctioned inexplicably, more samples disappeared, and the eerie plant growth continued to spread, despite our best efforts to contain it. As we struggled to make sense of these events, I stumbled upon a disturbing piece of information. While researching potential threats to the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest, I discovered plans for a massive resort development that would clear thousands of acres, including the area where we'd found the sentient flowers. Green Valley Resorts, I read aloud to Sarah, my voice tight with anger. They're planning to break ground in just a few months. Sarah, we can't let this happen. Those plants, that entire ecosystem, it'll be destroyed. Sarah nodded, her face grim. But what can we do, Mia? We have no evidence left, and no one believed us even when we did. I paced the lab, my mind racing. The threat of the resort, combined with the warning I'd received and the strange occurrences in the lab, painted a disturbing picture. Someone powerful wanted to keep our discovery quiet, likely to clear the way for their development plans. As I turned to share my thoughts with Sarah, my eyes fell on a small tendril that had grown through a crack in the floor. It seemed to reach towards me, swaying gently despite the lack of breeze in the lab. In that moment, I made a decision. We're going public, I said, my voice firm with resolve. Sarah's eyes widened. Public? Mia, are you sure? After everything that's happened? I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. It's the only way to protect the forest and the plants. We'll hold a press conference, present all our findings. Even if people don't believe in the plant's sentience, the threat to a unique ecosystem might be enough to halt the development. But what about the threats? The people behind all this? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. We can't let fear stop us from doing what's right. Those plants trusted us, showed us their world. We owe it to them to fight for their survival. As we began to prepare for the press conference, gathering what evidence we had left and preparing our statements, I couldn't shake a feeling of both dread and determination. We were about to challenge powerful interests, to push the boundaries of scientific understanding, and to fight for a form of life that most people couldn't even comprehend. The vibrant blue flowers of the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest had changed my life, shown me wonders beyond imagination. Now it was time to repay that gift, to become the voice for a silent, sentient world that stood on the brink of destruction. As I drafted my statement for the press, I felt a familiar whisper at the edge of my consciousness, a distant echo of the forest's vast, interconnected mind. In that moment, I knew that no matter the consequences, no matter the ridicule or danger we might face, this was a fight worth having. The threat loomed large, but so did the potential to change the world's understanding of life itself. With a deep breath, I turned to Sarah, my voice steady as I said, "Let's do this. For the forest, for science, and for a future where we recognize the consciousness in all living things." The stage was set. The truth was about to be revealed, and the fate of an entire hidden world hung in the balance. The camera flashes were blinding as I stepped up to the podium, my heart pounding in my chest. The conference room was packed with journalists, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what I knew would be the most important presentation of my career. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice shaky but determined, "thank you for coming. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything we thought we knew about plant life and consciousness itself." As I launched into my explanation of the sentient, telepathic plants we discovered in the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest, I could see the expressions in the room shift. Curiosity gave way to disbelief, and then, to my dismay, to barely concealed amusement. Dr. Chen, a journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, interrupted. "Are you seriously claiming that these plants can communicate telepathically and that they bleed?" I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "I know it sounds incredible, but I have evidence. If you'll just let me explain the cellular structures we've observed." but my words were drowned out by a wave of laughter that rippled through the room. I felt my face flush with embarrassment as the journalists began to talk among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others openly mocking my claims. "Dr. Chen," another reporter called out, barely containing his laughter, "have these plants told you their preferred pronouns yet?" More laughter erupted, and I felt my carefully prepared presentation crumbling around me. I looked desperately at Sarah, who sat in the front row, her face a mask of sympathy and concern. "Please," I said, my voice rising with desperation. "This is serious. The entire ecosystem is at risk. If you just look at the data." But it was too late. The room had descended into chaos, with journalists either dismissing my claims outright or using them as fodder for ridicule. As I gathered my materials and fled the podium, I could hear the mocking questions following me. "Hey, Dr. Chen, can you ask the plants what the winning lottery numbers are?" The soft glow of the computer screen illuminated Dr. Elena Vasquez's face as she leaned forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. I had just finished presenting our findings, and the renowned expert in plant communication sat in stunned silence for a moment before speaking. "Mia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if what you're saying is true, this could revolutionize our entire understanding of plant intelligence and consciousness." I nodded, relief washing over me. After weeks of ridicule and skepticism from my colleagues, it felt incredible to finally have someone believe me. "It is true, Dr. Vasquez. I've seen it, felt it. These plants are not just alive. They're aware, they communicate, and now they're in danger." Dr. Vasquez stood up, pacing her office. "The implications are staggering, but you say there's a threat to these plants? A development project?" "Yes," I replied, pulling out a folder of documents. "Green Valley Resorts plans to clear thousands of acres, including the area where we found the sentient flowers. We need to stop them, but we also need to prove the existence of these plants in a way the scientific community can't ignore." Elena nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "Then we'll need a plan, and we'll need allies. This isn't just about protecting a forest anymore. It's about preserving a form of intelligence we've never encountered before." Over the next few hours, Elena and I brainstormed, our excitement growing as we formulated a strategy. We would need to gather irrefutable evidence, which meant another expedition into the forest, but this time we'd go prepared. "We should assemble a small team," Elena suggested. "Experts in various fields who can corroborate our findings. I have a few colleagues who might be willing to help." I agreed, thinking of the few scientists and environmentalists I knew who might be open-minded enough to consider our claims. "We'll need to be careful, though," I cautioned. "There are people who don't want this information getting out." Elena's eyes narrowed. "All the more reason to move quickly. I'll make some calls." Over the next week, we carefully recruited our team. Dr. James Wong, a brilliant neurobiologist, Dr. Aisha Patel, an expert in plant genetics, and Mark Greenwood, an environmental activist with connections in the media. Each brought unique skills and perspectives to our cause. As we gathered for our first meeting, the air was thick with anticipation and a touch of nervousness. I looked around at the faces of our small group, feeling a surge of hope. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "What we're about to undertake is not just a scientific expedition, but a mission to protect something extraordinary. The plants we've discovered in the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest are unlike anything we've ever encountered." Dr. Wong leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You're claiming these plants are sentient? Capable of communication?" I nodded. "Not just communication, Dr. Wong. They have a form of consciousness, a collective intelligence that spans the entire forest." That's impossible," Dr. Patel interjected, but there was a hint of excitement in her voice. "I thought so too," I admitted, "but I've experienced it firsthand, and now we need to prove it to the world before it's too late." Mark Greenwood spoke up, his voice firm. "Even if we can prove it, we're up against some powerful interests. Green Valley Resorts has a lot of money and influence backing this development project. Which is why we need to be smart about this, Elena added. We go in, gather our evidence, and then we go public in a way they can't ignore or suppress. As we finalized our plans for the expedition, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. We were about to venture back into a world that had already shown itself to be both wondrous and dangerous. The day of our expedition dawned clear and cool. As we entered the forest, I felt a familiar tingle at the edge of my consciousness. The plants were aware of our presence. Everyone stay alert, I cautioned as we made our way deeper into the woods. And remember, try to approach this with an open mind. What you're about to experience may challenge everything you thought you knew about plant life. As we neared the clearing where I'd first encountered the sentient flowers, a commotion in the distance caught our attention. The sound of machinery and shouting voices carried through the trees. "Loggers!" Mark hissed, his face darkening with anger. We crept closer, staying hidden behind the thick foliage. What we saw next left us all speechless. A group of men with chainsaws were attempting to cut down trees at the edge of the clearing, but the forest seemed to be fighting back. Vines whipped out of nowhere, entangling the loggers' equipment. Roots burst from the ground, causing the men to stumble and fall. "My God," Dr. Wong whispered, his scientific skepticism crumbling before his eyes. Dr. Patel was frantically taking notes and samples, her hands shaking with excitement. "This is incredible. The level of coordination, the speed of response, it's like the entire forest is one organism." As we watched, the loggers' frustration turned to fear. They began to retreat, shouting in confusion and alarm as the forest continued its assault. Suddenly, I felt a sharp warning in my mind. "We need to move," I said urgently. "Now." No sooner had the words left my mouth than the forest around us came alive. Vines and branches reached for us, not attacking, but trying to push us away from the area. "What's happening?" Mark yelled as we ran, dodging the animated plant life. "The forest is protecting itself," Elena shouted back. "And us. It's creating a diversion to help us escape." We barely made it back to our vehicles, our hearts pounding and minds reeling from what we'd just witnessed. As we caught our breath, I looked at my team. Their faces showed a mix of awe, excitement, and a touch of fear. "Now, do you believe me?" I asked, unable to keep a note of triumph from my voice. Dr. Wong nodded slowly. I don't know how to explain what I just saw, but you're right, Mia. This is something beyond our current understanding of plant life. We need to act fast," Mark said, already pulling out his phone. "I have contacts in the media. Once we compile our evidence, we need to go public immediately." Dr. Patel was still examining the samples she'd managed to collect. "These plants, the potential applications of their abilities are staggering. We need to ensure they're protected and studied ethically." Elena placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mia, what you've discovered here, it's going to change everything, but we have a fight ahead of us." I nodded, feeling a mix of determination and hope. "Then let's get to work. We have a forest to save and a world to convince." As we drove back to the city, I felt the lingering presence of the forest in my mind. It was a reminder of the incredible responsibility we now carried. We weren't just fighting to protect a patch of land anymore. We were fighting for the recognition of a new form of intelligent life. The road ahead would be challenging. We'd face skepticism, ridicule, and likely more direct threats from those who wanted to exploit or destroy the forest. But as I looked at my team, at these brilliant minds who had seen the truth with their own eyes, I knew we stood a chance. The sentient plants of Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest had found their allies. Now it was time to take our discovery to the world and change the course of scientific understanding forever. As we pulled into the city, Elena voiced the thought we were all having. "You know, after what we've seen today, I don't think any of us will ever look at a plant the same way again." I smiled, feeling a surge of excitement for the journey ahead. That's the point, isn't it? To open eyes, change minds, and protect something truly extraordinary. With renewed determination, we set off to compile our evidence and prepare for the fight of our lives. The soft glow of computer screens illuminated our makeshift command center, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Our team had been working tirelessly for days, compiling evidence and preparing our case to present to the world. The air was thick with tension and excitement. I was reviewing our latest findings when Elena burst through the door, her face pale with worry. "Mia, we've got trouble, big trouble." My heart sank as she explained. Our encrypted communications had been compromised. The development company behind Green Valley Resorts had discovered our plans and was taking drastic action. "They're sending mercenaries, Mia," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Armed men to destroy our research and silence us." The room erupted into chaos as our team scrambled to secure our data and evacuate. But I knew we couldn't just run. Our research, our connection to the forest, it was all too important to abandon. "We need to get to the forest," I said, my voice cutting through the panic. "It's our only chance. The plants can protect us." Dr. Wong looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mia, these are armed men we're talking about. We can't fight them with flowers." "You've seen what the forest can do," I insisted. "It's our only hope. We need to trust in the connection we've established." Despite their reservations, the team agreed. We quickly gathered our most crucial data and equipment, then piled into our vehicles. As we sped towards the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest, I could feel the plant consciousness reaching out, growing stronger with each mile. We had barely entered the forest when we heard the roar of engines behind us. The mercenaries had caught up. "Everyone out!" I shouted as we screeched to a halt. "Into the trees now!" We scattered into the undergrowth as the first shots rang out. The forest around us seemed to come alive, branches and vines moving of their own accord to provide cover. "This way," I called, feeling a pull from the plant consciousness. As we ran deeper into the woods, I focused on that connection, silently pleading for help. The response was immediate and awe-inspiring. Behind us, trees began to shift and move, their roots breaking free of the earth to create barriers. Vines lashed out, ensnaring our pursuers. The entire forest had become our protector and ally. "My God," Dr. Patel gasped as we paused to catch our breath. "It's like the whole forest is alive." "It is alive," I said, feeling the surge of the collective plant consciousness more strongly than ever. "And it's fighting for us." As we continued our frantic flight, I felt my connection to the forest deepen. It was as if I could see through the eyes of every plant, feel the pulse of life in every root and leaf. With growing amazement, I realized I could influence their actions. "Follow me," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "I know how we can stop them." I led our group towards a dense thicket, the plant life parting to let us through. Behind us, I could hear the shouts and curses of the mercenaries as they struggled against the animate forest. "Here," I said, indicating a small clearing. "This is where we make our stand." As the others looked at me in confusion, I closed my eyes and focused on the plant consciousness surrounding us. I visualized a trap, a living cage of vegetation, and projected that image into the collective mind of the forest. The response was immediate. The plants around the clearing began to grow and shift at an incredible rate. Thick vines intertwined to form walls, while thorny bushes created an impenetrable floor. "Incredible," Elena whispered, watching in awe as I shaped the forest with my mind. The sounds of pursuit grew closer. "Get ready," I warned the others. "When they enter the clearing, I'll spring the trap." Moments later, the first of the mercenaries burst into view. As they entered the clearing, weapons raised, I focused all my will on closing the trap. The vegetation responded instantly, surging upward and inward, encasing the men in a living prison of plant matter. Shouts of confusion and fear filled the air as more mercenaries fell into the trap. Within minutes, all of our pursuers were contained, their weapons useless against the constantly regenerating plant life. As the last of the mercenaries was secured, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The deep connection with the forest consciousness began to fade, leaving me drained, but exhilarated. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, looking around at my team. They nodded, their faces a mix of relief and amazement. Dr. Wong approached me, his earlier skepticism replaced by wonder. "Mia, what you just did, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. You were actually controlling the plants." I shook my head. "Not controlling, cooperating. The forest wants to survive as much as we do. We just found a way to work together." Mark was already on his satellite phone, contacting his media connections. "This is it," he said excitedly. "The proof we needed. Armed mercenaries sent by a development company, trapped by a sentient forest. It's a story that can't be ignored or covered up." As the adrenaline of our escape began to fade, the reality of our situation sank in. We had won this battle, but the war for the forest's survival was far from over. "What now?" Dr. Patel asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. I looked around at the living forest that had saved us, feeling the faint echo of its consciousness in my mind. "Now," I said, "we take this to the world. We show them what we've discovered, what we've experienced. We make them understand that this forest isn't just a resource to be exploited. It's a sentient being that deserves protection." Elena nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And we need to move fast. Once word of this gets out, there will be others who want to study the forest, maybe even exploit its abilities. Then we set the terms," I said firmly. "We work with reputable scientists, ethical organizations. We make sure the forest is protected as we learn from it." As we made our way back to our vehicles, escorted by a canopy of gently swaying branches, I couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. We had faced incredible danger and come out victorious, thanks to our alliance with the sentient forest. But I also felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. We had uncovered something extraordinary, something that could change the world's understanding of life itself. It was up to us to make sure that discovery was handled with care and respect. As we emerged from the forest's edge, I turned back to look at the sea of green that had become so much more than just trees and plants to me. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a warm pulse of acknowledgement in return. The sun was setting as we drove back to the city, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Our team was quiet, each lost in thought about the incredible events we had just experienced. I broke the silence, addressing the group. "What we've discovered, what we've been through, it's going to change everything. Are we ready for that?" Dr. Wong spoke up, his voice filled with renewed purpose. "Ready or not, we have a responsibility. To the forest, to science, to the world. We can't back down now." Elena reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're with you, Mia. Whatever comes next, we face it together." As the forest receded in our rearview mirror, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation for what lay ahead. We had allies in the plant world now, a connection to a vast, ancient intelligence. But we also had powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to exploit or destroy what we had found. The true battle for the forest's survival, and perhaps for a new understanding of life itself, was just beginning. But as I looked at my team, at these brilliant minds who had seen the impossible and embraced it, I knew we were ready for the challenge. The sentient forest had chosen us as its ambassadors to the human world. It was time to make our stand, to bridge the gap between two forms of consciousness, and to fight for a future where humans and plants could coexist in harmony and mutual understanding. As we drove into the sunset, the weight of our discovery heavy on our minds, I couldn't help but smile. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we had experienced something truly miraculous. The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when I was jolted awake by the insistent ringing of my phone. Groggily, I fumbled for the device, my eyes widening as I saw the flood of missed calls and messages. "Mia, are you seeing this?" Elena's voice crackled through the speaker, a mix of awe and panic. "Turn on the news now." I stumbled to the living room, flicking on the TV. The scene that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. Our small town, once a picture of suburban tranquility, was now a jungle. Streets were choked with vines, trees had burst through sidewalks, and flowers of impossible sizes bloomed from every surface. Unprecedented botanical phenomenon, a wide-eyed reporter was saying, her voice trembling. Residents are advised to stay indoors as authorities attempt to contain the situation. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dr. Wong. Mia, it's not just our town. Reports are coming in from all over the country. The plants, they're everywhere. I felt a familiar tingle at the edge of my consciousness. The plant collective was reaching out, its presence stronger than ever before. But this time, there was an undercurrent of fear, of desperation. I need to get out there, I said, more to myself than to Dr. Wong. I need to understand what's happening. As I stepped outside, I was immediately engulfed in a world transformed. The air was thick with pollen and the sweet scent of 1,000 flowers. Vines coiled around lampposts and cars, while trees seemed to sway with purposeful intent. "Dr. Chen," a voice called out. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, peering fearfully from her window. "What's happening? Is it true what they're saying on the news? That these plants are alive?" I hesitated, knowing the weight my words would carry. "Mrs. Johnson, I need you to stay calm. Yes, these plants are more than they seem, but they're not inherently dangerous. Please stay inside and wait for further instructions." As I made my way through the transformed streets, I could feel the plant consciousness pressing against my mind, more insistent than ever before. Images flashed through my head: laboratories, bulldozers, fire. The plants were showing me their fears, the reasons for their uprising. My phone buzzed again. It was Mark. "Mia, it's bad. The development company has launched a full-scale media blitz. They're painting the plants as an invasive species, a threat to humanity. People are panicking." I gritted my teeth. "We need to counter their narrative, Mark. Get our evidence out there. Show people that the plants are intelligent, that they're acting out of self-preservation." "I'm trying," Mark replied, frustration evident in his voice. "But fear is spreading faster than facts. There are already reports of people trying to burn down affected areas." As if in response to Mark's words, I felt a surge of alarm from the plant consciousness. The vines around me writhed, and I could sense a wave of activity spreading through the town. "Mark, we need to move fast," I said urgently. "The plants are scared. If we don't do something soon, this could escalate into a full-blown war." I made my way to our makeshift command center, dodging panicked citizens and overzealous news crews. Inside, I found Elena and Dr. Patel hunched over a bank of computers, their faces pale with worry. "Mia, thank God you're here," Elena said, looking up. "We're getting reports from all over. The plants are advancing, reclaiming developed areas at an unprecedented rate. Military forces are being mobilized in some regions." I closed my eyes, reaching out to the plant consciousness. The fear and determination I sensed were overwhelming. "They're trying to protect themselves," I said softly. "They've seen what humans are capable of, and they're striking first out of self-preservation." Dr. Patel looked at me, her eyes wide. "Can you communicate with them? Make them understand that not all humans are a threat?" I nodded slowly. "I can try. But it's not just the plants we need to convince. We need to reach the humans too, show them that coexistence is possible." As if on cue, the TV in the corner blared to life with breaking news. The CEO of Green Valley Resorts, flanked by a team of scientists, was addressing the nation. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice dripping with false concern, "what we are witnessing today is nothing short of an alien invasion. These plants, with their unnatural abilities and aggressive growth, pose a clear and present danger to our way of life. We must stand together and eradicate this threat before it's too late." I felt a surge of anger, both from myself and from the plant consciousness. "We need to counter this narrative," I said, turning to my team. "Elena, can you set up a live stream? We need to show the world the truth." As Elena worked to set up the equipment, I closed my eyes, focusing on the plant consciousness. I projected images of harmony, of humans and plants working together, of the beauty and benefit of coexistence. I felt a flicker of understanding, a lessening of the fear and aggression. "We're live in 30 seconds, Elena called out. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what might be the most important moment of my life. As the red light on the camera blinked on, I began to speak. "People of the world, my name is Dr. Mia Chen. What you are witnessing today is not an invasion, but a desperate plea for survival. The plants you see are not mindless invaders, but sentient beings capable of thought and emotion. They are acting out of fear, just as many of you are right now." I paused, letting my words sink in. I have communicated with these plants. I have felt their consciousness, their hopes, and their fears. They don't want to harm us. They want to live, to grow, to be understood. Just like us. As I spoke, I could feel a change in the plant consciousness surrounding us. The frantic energy was calming, replaced by a cautious hope. "To the plants, if you can understand me," I continued, "please cease your advance. Show humanity that you are not a threat, but a new form of life seeking understanding." I felt a ripple of acknowledgement through the plant consciousness. Outside, the frenzied growth began to slow. "And to humanity," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I implore you to set aside your fear. What we have discovered here is not a threat but an opportunity to expand our understanding of life itself, to forge a new relationship with the natural world." As I spoke, reports began to flood in. The plants were retreating in many areas, their aggressive growth halting. In some places, they even seemed to be helping, vines gently lowering people from upper floors of buildings, trees forming protective canopies over vulnerable areas. "We stand at a crossroads," I concluded, looking directly into the camera. "We can choose fear and destruction, or we can choose understanding and coexistence. The plants have shown their willingness to communicate. Now it's our turn to listen." As I ended the broadcast, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, but there was also hope. The plant consciousness radiated a cautious optimism, and reports were coming in of people reaching out to the plants, attempting communication. Elena approached me, her eyes shining with tears. "You did it, Mia. You bridged the gap." I shook my head, smiling tiredly. "We've only just begun. There's still so much work to do, so much to learn. But for now, we've averted a war." As we stepped outside, the world seemed different. The frantic energy of the morning had been replaced by a sense of wonder. People were cautiously exploring the transformed landscape, marveling at the incredible forms of plant life. I reached out, gently touching a nearby vine. It curled around my finger, not threatening, but curious. In that moment, I knew that everything had changed. The relationship between humanity and the natural world would never be the same. The uprising had been quelled, but the revolution, a revolution of understanding and coexistence, one was just beginning. And I, along with my team, would be at the forefront, helping to shape this new world where humans and sentient plants could live in harmony. As the sun set on this extraordinary day, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement for what the future might hold. We had taken the first step on an incredible journey, one that promised to reshape our understanding of life itself. The road ahead would be challenging, but with open minds and open hearts, I believed we could create a future beyond anything we had ever imagined. The imposing government building loomed before me, its stone facade a stark contrast to the vibrant green tendrils that had begun to creep up its sides. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Today, I would stand before some of the most powerful people in the country, pleading the case for a life form they barely understood. As I entered the conference room, I felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon me. Government officials, military personnel, and scientific advisors filled the room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "Dr. Chen," a stern-faced woman at the head of the table addressed me, "I'm Director Hawthorne. We've read your reports, and witnessed your broadcast. We're here to listen, but I must warn you, many of us remain skeptical about your claims. I nodded, feeling the comforting presence of the plant consciousness at the edge of my mind. Thank you for this opportunity, Director. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything we thought we knew about plant life and consciousness itself. For the next hour, I presented our findings, showing video evidence, scientific data, and personal testimonies from my team. I could see the disbelief on many faces slowly giving way to astonishment. These plants, I concluded, are not just alive in the way we've always understood. They are sentient, capable of thought, emotion, and complex communication. And they have a right to exist, to be protected. A murmur ran through the room. An older man in a military uniform spoke up, his voice gruff. Dr. Chen, even if what you're saying is true, these plants have shown they can be a threat. They've taken over entire towns overnight. How can we justify protecting something that could potentially harm our citizens? I felt a surge of emotion from the plant consciousness, a mixture of fear, regret, and hope. Taking a deep breath, I opened myself fully to their presence, allowing their thoughts to flow through me. The plants acted out of fear, I said, my voice taking on a strange, otherworldly quality that caused several people to lean forward in their seats. They have witnessed centuries of destruction at the hands of humans, but they do not wish for conflict. They offer an exchange. Director Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. An exchange? What could these plants possibly offer us? I felt ancient knowledge flooding my mind, images of healing and growth beyond anything modern science had achieved. They offer to share their knowledge, I said. Centuries of evolutionary wisdom, natural compounds that could revolutionize medicine, sustainable growth patterns that could transform our agriculture and urban development. All of this in exchange for protection and respect. The room erupted in excited whispers. A scientist near the back stood up, her eyes shining with excitement. Dr. Chen, are you saying these plants could provide cures for diseases we've been struggling with for decades? I nodded, feeling the plant consciousness pulse with affirmation. That and more. They have solutions to problems we haven't even recognized yet. But they need our help to survive, to thrive. They're offering a partnership, a chance for coexistence that could benefit both our species immeasurably. As the implications of this offer sank in, I could see the mood in the room shifting. Even the most skeptical faces now showed glimmers of interest and hope. Director Hawthorne leaned forward, her voice cautious but intrigued. This is unprecedented, Dr. Chen. We'll need time to discuss and verify your claims, but if what you're saying is true, the potential benefits to humanity could be enormous. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We were making progress. But just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Excusing myself, I stepped out into the hallway to answer. Mia! Elena's panicked voice came through. It's the forest. Green Valley Resorts has launched an attack. They're trying to destroy the heart of the plant consciousness before the government can act. My blood ran cold. What? How? There are supposed to be protective measures in place. They're claiming it's a controlled burn for forest management, Elena said, her voice bitter. But they've brought in heavy machinery. They're tearing through the protective barriers we set up. Mia, you need to get back here now. I rushed back into the conference room, my heart pounding. I apologize for the interruption, but we have an emergency. The forest, the heart of the plant consciousness, is under attack right now by the development company. The room erupted in chaos. Director Hawthorne's voice cut through the noise. Dr. Chen, are you certain? This is a serious accusation. I nodded, feeling the growing distress of the plant consciousness. I can feel their pain. Please, we need to act now. If the heart of the forest is destroyed, we'll lose everything. All the knowledge, all the potential for cooperation and advancement. Director Hawthorne turned to her aides, issuing rapid-fire orders. Get me satellite imagery of the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest, and someone get the governor on the line, now. As the government officials scrambled to respond, I closed my eyes, reaching out to the plant consciousness. The pain and fear I felt were overwhelming. Trees were falling, ancient roots being torn from the earth. The very heart of the forest's collective mind was under assault. "I need to go there," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to be with them." To my surprise, Director Hawthorne nodded. "Go, Dr. Chen. We'll do what we can from here. But be careful. This situation could turn dangerous quickly." I raced out of the building, my mind already linking more deeply with the plant consciousness. As I sped towards the forest, I could feel every fallen tree, every scorched leaf. The pain was almost unbearable. When I arrived at the edge of the forest, the scene was one of chaos and destruction. Bulldozers and logging equipment tore through the underbrush, while men with chainsaws attacked the larger trees. The air was thick with smoke from small fires set to clear the ground. "Stop!" I screamed, running towards the nearest group of workers. "You don't understand what you're doing." But my voice was lost in the roar of machinery and the crack of falling timber. I could feel the forest's desperation, its struggle to defend itself. Vines whipped out to entangle equipment, roots burst from the ground to trip the invaders. But it wasn't enough. In that moment of despair, I felt a surge of power from the plant consciousness. A desperate plan formed in my mind. If they couldn't understand with words, perhaps they could be made to feel. Closing my eyes, I opened myself fully to the forest's pain and memory. Then, using every ounce of the connection I had formed with the plants, I broadcast those feelings outward, not just to the workers, but to everyone in the vicinity. The government officials watching via satellite, the nearby towns, even the executives of Green Valley Resorts. Suddenly the forest fell silent. The machine stopped and the chainsaws died away. All around me, people fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the torrent of emotion and memory. They felt the slow, patient growth of centuries, the quiet joy of sunlight and rain. They experienced the deep bonds between trees, the complex network of roots and fungi that connected the entire forest. And they felt the pain, the agony of being cut, burned, and torn from the earth. Tears streamed down faces covered in dirt and sweat. Hardened loggers dropped their chainsaws, looking around in wonder and horror at what they had been doing. As the sensation faded, I heard sirens in the distance. Government vehicles were arriving, no doubt alerted by the desperate broadcast I had sent out. A burly man approached me, his eyes wide with a new understanding. I had no idea," he stammered. "We thought it was just trees, just a resource to be used. But it's alive. It feels. My God, what have we done?" I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the forest's consciousness extend a tendril of forgiveness. "It's not too late," I said softly. "We can still make this right." As government officials swarmed the area, cordoning off the damaged sections and interviewing shell-shocked workers, I felt a profound shift in the atmosphere. The fear and aggression that had dominated both sides were gone, replaced by a sense of wonder and remorse. Director Hawthorne approached me, her face pale but determined. "Dr. Chen, I felt it. We all did. Consider your case made. As of this moment, this entire forest is under government protection. We'll need your help to establish communication protocols, to learn how to coexist." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude from the plant consciousness. "Thank you, Director. This is just the beginning. We have so much to learn from each other." As the sun set over the battered but resilient forest, I felt a sense of hope stronger than anything I had experienced before. The negotiation had been hard fought, but we had finally broken through. Humans and plants, two forms of consciousness so different yet so deeply connected, were on the brink of a new era of understanding and cooperation. The forest hummed with renewed life and purpose. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings to navigate, and wounds to heal on both sides. But as I stood there feeling the gentle brush of leaves against my skin and the deep ancient wisdom of the trees flowing through my mind, I knew that we had taken the first, crucial step towards a future of true harmony with the natural world. The weeks following the dramatic events in the forest were a whirlwind of activity. The shared psychic experience had sent shockwaves through society, fundamentally altering the way people viewed the natural world. As I stood before a sea of reporters outside the newly established Sentient Forest Protection Agency headquarters, I could feel the weight of expectation on my shoulders. "Dr. Chen," a journalist called out, "how do you respond to critics who say we're moving too fast in granting rights to these plants?" I took a deep breath, feeling the comforting presence of the plant consciousness at the edge of my mind. "Change is never easy," I began. "But what we've discovered here isn't just a scientific breakthrough. It's a revolution in our understanding of life itself. These plants are intelligent, emotional beings. They've been our silent partners on this planet for millions of years. It's time we recognize them as such." Another reporter raised her hand. "But what about the economic impact? The protected reserve will cover thousands of acres of valuable land." I nodded, acknowledging the concern. "It's true that there will be short-term economic adjustments, but the knowledge and capabilities these plants offer us far outweigh any temporary setbacks. We're already seeing breakthroughs in medicine, agriculture, and environmental science that will benefit humanity for generations to come." As the press conference wound down, I felt a gentle tug on my consciousness. The forest was calling. Excusing myself, I made my way to the edge of the protected zone, where a group of scientists and government officials were gathered. Dr. Wong greeted me with a smile. "Mia, you're just in time. We're about to test the new communication array." The array was a marvel of bioengineering, a hybrid of human technology and plant biology designed to facilitate clearer communication between our species. As we activated the system, I felt the plant consciousness surge forward, eager to connect. Suddenly, the air was filled with a symphony of thoughts and emotions. Government officials gasped in wonder as they experienced direct communication with the forest for the first time. "It's incredible," Director Hawthorne whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "I can feel their thoughts, their memories. It's like nothing I've ever experienced." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. "This is just the beginning," I said. "There's so much more to learn, so much potential for cooperation." As we worked to establish protocols for interaction and study, news broke that sent ripples through the political and business world. An anonymous whistleblower had come forward with evidence of Green Valley Resort's illegal activities, bribery, environmental violations, and attempts to suppress scientific findings. The fallout was swift and severe. As I watched the news coverage of the company's CEO being led away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mix of emotions from the plant consciousness, satisfaction at justice being served, but also a deep sadness for the harm that had been done. "They're not vengeful," I explained to Elena as we watched the coverage. "They understand the concept of justice, but they're more concerned with healing and moving forward." Elena nodded, her eyes shining with excitement. "It's fascinating how their consciousness works. So alien, yet in some ways so similar to our own. We have so much to learn from them." In the months that followed, I spent most of my time in the forest, deepening my connection with the plant consciousness and helping to coordinate research efforts. The protected reserve was thriving, with new species of sentient plants being discovered almost daily. One crisp autumn morning, as I walked through a grove of ancient oaks, I felt a shift in the plant consciousness. It was trying to show me something, to share a memory that felt impossibly old. I closed my eyes, opening my mind to the forest. Suddenly, I was transported back millions of years, experiencing the world through the slow, patient awareness of the first plants to develop consciousness. I felt their gradual awakening, their wonder at the world around them, and their long, silent watch over the evolution of other species, including humans. As the vision faded, I found myself on my knees, tears streaming down my face. Dr. Patel, who had been walking with me, rushed to my side. "Mia, are you all right? What happened?" I looked up at her, struggling to find words to describe what I had experienced. "They've been waiting for us," I said softly. "All this time, they've been waiting for us to evolve enough to understand them, to communicate." Dr. Patel helped me to my feet, her face a mix of concern and fascination. What does this mean for our research? For our understanding of plant evolution? I shook my head, still processing the enormity of what I had seen. It means we need to rethink everything. Our entire understanding of consciousness, of intelligence, it's all just the tip of the iceberg. As we made our way back to the research station, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey we had embarked on was far greater than I had ever imagined. We weren't just protecting a forest or studying a new form of life. We were bridging a gap millions of years in the making. That evening, as the sun set over the forest, casting long shadows through the trees, I stood before a gathering of scientists, government officials, and members of the public. It was time to share what I had learned, to help others understand the true significance of our discovery. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, feeling the support of the plant consciousness bolstering my words. What we have discovered here is not just a new species or a scientific curiosity. It is a window into the very nature of consciousness itself. I went on to explain the vision I had experienced, the long history of plant sentience, and the implications for our understanding of life and intelligence. These beings have been our silent guardians for millions of years, I continued. They have watched us grow, struggle, and evolve. And now, finally, we have reached a point where we can communicate with them, learn from them, and grow alongside them. As I spoke, I could feel the audience's amazement and wonder. Even those who had been skeptical before were now leaning forward, captivated by the possibilities. But with this knowledge comes great responsibility, I said, my voice growing serious. We stand at a crossroads. We can choose to embrace this new relationship with the natural world, to learn and grow in harmony with these ancient beings. Or we can turn away, clinging to our old understanding and missing this incredible opportunity. I paused, looking out over the sea of faces. I believe we must choose the path of cooperation and mutual understanding. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, misunderstandings, and difficult decisions ahead. But the potential benefits, for science, for medicine, for our very understanding of life itself, are beyond measure. As I concluded my speech, the forest itself seemed to respond. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it a sense of hope and possibility that everyone present could feel. In the days and weeks that followed, our work took on a new urgency and importance. Research teams from around the world flocked to the reserve, eager to learn and contribute. Government agencies worked to establish new laws and regulations to protect sentient plant species globally. And through it all, I found myself at the center, serving as a bridge between two worlds. It was a role I never could have imagined for myself, but one I embraced with all my heart. One evening, as I stood at the edge of the forest, watching the stars come out overhead, I felt a deep sense of contentment wash over me. The plant consciousness reached out, enveloping me in a feeling of gratitude and kinship. "We've come so far," I whispered to the trees, "but we have so much further to go." In response, I felt a surge of excitement and anticipation from the forest. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but we would face it together. Two forms of life, so different yet so deeply connected, working in harmony to build a better future for all. As I turned to head back to the research station, I couldn't help but smile. My life had been transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I had become an ambassador between worlds, with the weight of both humanity's and the plant's futures resting on my shoulders. But I wasn't afraid. With the wisdom of the forest to guide me and the support of my fellow humans, I knew we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The resolution we had reached was just the beginning.